Chapter 1740. How did you get into this industry? Hua Jin's expression changed all of a sudden. His expression turned cold as he retorted, "Do you think I like acting that much?" "What do you mean?" "I got into this industry a few years earlier than you, so I've seen through the fickleness of the entertainment industry. Sometimes I feel tired of it, but even if I'm tired of it, I have no choice but to submit to the rules of this industry." Hua Jin paused, then turned to look at her. "Do you know how much I envy you?" Yun Sheshe was confused by his sudden question. "You asked me how I got into this industry, but rather than saying I got in, it's more like I was sent in." "Sent?" "Yeah. I got into this industry because my father sold me." Hua Jin answered with a lonely expression. Yun Sheshe was shocked. "Sold?" She looked at him in surprise, thinking that he was joking. How could there be such a father who would sell his own son into this industry? For the first time in her life, she had the desire to find out more about Hua Jin's background. Yun Sheshe's gaze was a little surprised. She hurriedly asked, "What do you mean by that? What do you mean by your father sold you into this industry?" "Because my father lost a lot of money in gambling and owed a huge debt. He couldn't pay it back, so he sold me to the creditor." As Hua Jin spoke, his lips suddenly curled into a cold smile. He laughed at himself. "Isn't it funny? I didn't dare to believe that he would do that back then. I was only 15 years old at the time." Under Hua Jin's nonchalant and seemingly casual narration, Yun Sheshe gradually learned about his story. Actually, Hua Jin was originally born into a wealthy family. His father was a senior executive in a foreign company, while his mother ran a business. The financial crisis of 1998 engulfed the whole of Asia, causing this originally wealthy family to fall into a deadlock. Hua Jin's mother's business went bankrupt. Not only that, but the foreign company that Hua Jin's father worked in also suffered quite a bit of damage. Because Hua Jin's mother went bankrupt, the whole family was dragged into a huge debt. Hua Jin's father saw that at a critical juncture, he took the unconventional sword and secretly embezzled a large sum of money to fill the hole in the debt. Once the matter was exposed, he couldn't pay it back. He was sued and finally sentenced to prison. 10 years in prison made things worse for this family, which was already treading on thin ice. When he was young, Hua Jin was very well. Even though he had a hard time, he never complained. In the 5th year of his father's life, his mother couldn't take it anymore. Calm. Hua Jin's father found out about this in prison and fell ill. After he was released from prison, Hua Jin's father couldn't find a job because of his financial crimes. His ability was extraordinary and outstanding, but other than ability, the company paid more attention to the employee's character. Looking at his resume, he had a criminal record. Who would hire him? Thus, without a stable job, Hua Jin's father could only work at a construction site. The huge difference in life, falling from the top to the bottom, was hard for him to accept. Chapter 1741. As a result, he started drinking and gambling. Every time he lost money, he would drink and get drunk. When he saw Hua Jin, it was as if he saw Hua Jin's mother, that fickle woman. When he thought about how she had left with another man while he was in prison, he felt extremely vexed and would use his belt to beat him. The young Hua Jin had no idea why his father would beat him every time he got drunk. What was worse was that because of his long-term gambling, Hua Jin's father's meager income from the construction site was not enough to repay his debts. As a result, in his memory, he always seemed to be drifting from city to city in a sorry state. In the end, when the creditor came knocking on his door, Hua Jin's father hardened his heart and sold him. That man tossed and turned in bed and finally sold him to a sugar daddy. This sugar daddy was quite powerful and controlled the shares of an entertainment management company. He had signed many artists under him, and they were all stunners. Of course, whether it was women or men, he played very fiercely. When he saw Hua Jin, he felt that if this otherworldly youth entered the entertainment industry and was groomed, he would definitely become a signature idol. When that time came, he would be a money tree. Hua Jin said this and did not continue. It seemed that those embarrassing memories should come to an end. He did not want to say it out loud, afraid that she would hate him. Hate him for being dirty. When Yun Sheshe heard this, she was stunned for a long time. She still looked incredulous. "I don't believe it. I don't believe that there is such a father in this world. You are his biological son. How could he do that?" The world is so big. There are all kinds of strange things. Hua Jin looked indifferent. When this matter was brought up, there was no change in his expression from beginning to end. It was as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. Anyway, it's all in the past. So, entering this industry is not of my own volition. After a pause, he laughed mockingly and said, "Actually, I really hate acting. I don't understand why some people like acting. According to the script, acting a character that is completely different from their own character to gain the audience's favor. Will this give rise to a sense of superiority? What was the difference between this and the actors of ancient times? I didn't like to play along with the audience's emotions. No matter how sad I was, I couldn't show it on my face. Isn't that tiring?" Yun Shirshir looked pensive, but said indifferently, "Everyone has their own aspirations." Hua Jin suddenly wrapped his arms around his knees and rested his chin on his knees. His gaze was desolate. "Sometimes I feel as sad as a clown. Perhaps when others are used to your smile, they can't see the true loneliness in your heart. You obviously want to cry, but you have to pretend to smile. Others smile, but what about yourself? But I feel even more lonely." Yun Shirshir sized him up. She found that he seemed to like this kind of action very much. From a psychological point of view, people who liked to sit like this were often filled with loneliness and vulnerability. They lacked a sense of security and were very sensitive to everything. Yun Shirshir turned to look at him sideways. Hua Jin was staring at the ground with his eyelashes drooping. Under the makeup, his fair and beautiful face exuded the unique aura of a man in ancient costume. But at this moment, he seemed especially lonely. Yun Shirshir felt pity for him and couldn't help but want to comfort him. Chapter 1742. Hua Jin, don't be sad. Everything will be fine. Before she could finish her sentence, all of a sudden, a sinister smile broke out on the man's face. "Haha, you've been fooled, haven't you?" He pointed at her. Seeing her sad expression, he mocked. "Shusha, you're so funny. I was just joking, and you took it for real. You're so gullible." "You." Yun Shirshir turned pale with fright. She was so angry that she laughed. "You were lying to me?" "What do you mean by lying?" Hua Jin felt wronged. "I was just too bored, so I was just joking with you. I didn't expect you to take it for real. It's so funny." Yun Shirshir was so angry that she was at a loss for words. Her face was ashen. Hua Jin carefully observed her expression. Seeing that she was really angry, he was at a loss for what to do. He pursed his lips and pitifully pulled on her sleeve like a helpless child who had made a mistake. With a sad face he said, "All right. I was wrong. I won't joke with you anymore. What I said just now was all a lie. Don't take it for real, okay? I entered the entertainment industry because I'm pretty. I was born to be in this bowl of rice. Other than acting, I have no other way out. I'm such an idiot. I actually believed your nonsense. Do you know that I took it for real just now? I even felt sad for you. I didn't expect you to be lying." Yun Shirshir was unusually angry. "Why did you lie to me?" she asked angrily. "Because I think you're very kind. That way, you'll take pity on me and treat me well." Hua Jin smiled. Slap. What he got in response was a cold slap. She did not use much strength. She only did it subconsciously because she was angry from embarrassment. Hua Jin held his aching cheek and stared at her helplessly. His eyes flashed with helplessness and confusion. Sure. Don't call my name like that. Who would joke about someone else's sympathy? You're too much." Yun Shirshir still hadn't calmed down. She found it funny and said, "You actually want to get other people's sympathy and let me pity you? Hua Jin, your joke is too much." Hua Jin was increasingly at a loss. He looked at her somewhat uneasily and tentatively tugged on her sleeve. Sure, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I won't joke with you in the future." Yun Shirshir suddenly waved his hand away and said coldly, "Stop pestering me. I'm going to film now." With that, she stood up abruptly, threw the script into his arms, and left. Hua Jin looked innocently at her back as she left. He bit his lips and looked like he was about to cry. It was already 2 in the morning when Yun Shirshir and Lin Ji finished their scenes together. When she left the set, Hua Jin was still sitting in his seat, looking at her with an innocent expression. Even if he wanted to go up and talk to her, he didn't have the courage. Yun Shirshir didn't look at him and left. She went home. Hua Jin sat there in a daze and couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. You actually want to get other people's sympathy and let me pity you? Hua Jin, your joke is too much. Yun Shirshir's angry words still echoed in his ears. Hua Jin touched his cheek and bit his lip. He felt like crying. Perhaps it was a little childish to use sympathy to get close to someone you liked. Chapter 1743. Perhaps it was a little childish to approach the person he liked by gaining sympathy. However, he was a little clumsy. It seemed that other than that, he did not know how to attract her attention. Preparations for the engagement ceremony were in full swing. Mu Yaja did not have many relatives and friends. There were only about 30 people. Most of them were important figures in Shengyu Company, including Lu Jinyu. Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, had even fewer relatives and friends. The engagement ceremony was set to be held on an island. Mu Yaja had meticulously prepared a beach engagement ceremony. Of course, these were all secretly prepared behind Yun Shirshir's back. He wanted to give her a surprise. Yun Shirshir did not know about this. Yun Shirshir had also slowly sent out the invitations that she had prepared. However, on the way to deliver the invitations, an accident happened. Perhaps it was because she was a little tired from filming the night before, but when she was driving, she accidentally bumped into a passerby. She was a middle-aged woman in her 40s. When Yun Shirshir was making a left turn, she suddenly sped off the road for some unknown reason. When she tried to stop the car, she failed to do so and ended up crashing to the ground. When Yun Shirshir got out of the car, she saw the woman lying on the ground hugging her knees. She wailed in pain as if she was in a lot of pain. The first thing she said when she saw Yun Shirshir was to accuse her of driving carelessly and then ask her to send her to the hospital. Yun Shirshir had never encountered such a thing before. Afraid that she would be seriously injured, she hurriedly sent her to the hospital. As soon as she arrived at the hospital, the woman clamored for a full-body checkup. Yun Shirshir naturally thought that her life was more important, so she accompanied her to register and paid for the medical expenses. Then, there was a few hours of waiting. When the full-body checkup was done, the report showed that she had a slight concussion and a relatively minor soft tissue contusion. Soon, the family members rushed to the hospital. Seeing that the injury was not serious, Yun Shirshir asked for a private chat. In her heart, she thought that since the collision was not serious, she would pay for all the medical expenses, as well as some compensation for lost work and nutrition. However, the woman's family demanded an exorbitant sum of 50,000 yuan for her medical expenses. Yun Shirshir was dumbfounded. She had never encountered such a situation before. Immediately, she raised her doubts and said, "Didn't the medical report say that the collision wasn't serious? It was just a little soft tissue contusion and a concussion. The doctor didn't even ask for hospitalization. Why is the compensation so high?" On the other side, the family member said eloquently, "You injured my sister, look. Take a look at the report from the doctor. High blood pressure. High blood pressure. If it weren't for your scare, would her blood pressure be so high? Do you know how serious the consequences are? If your blood pressure is too high, you'll have a cerebral hemorrhage. If it's light, he'll have a stroke. If it's serious, he'll lose his life. Do you know that? My uncle died of a cerebral hemorrhage. If it weren't for you, would my mother be like this?" A few family members surrounded her aggressively, as if they were interrogating an unforgivable criminal. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows. She had thought that it was just a normal accident and that she would be able to get out of it after paying compensation. She had not expected that she would encounter such weirdos. Chapter 1744. Yun Shirshir did not want to argue with them. After all, it was not easy for these people to come to the city to work. Coincidentally, she still had a sum of money on her. She estimated that she had about 10,000 yuan, which was more than enough to compensate them. Thus, she negotiated, "I don't want to argue with you, but I don't have 50,000 yuan on me. How about this? I'll compensate you 15,000 yuan, and this matter will be considered settled, okay?" When the family members saw this, they were furious. "So what if you're rich? Can you humiliate people like this just because you're rich? 15,000 yuan? Are you King trying to dismiss a beggar? You want to leave after paying 15,000 yuan? Is that even possible? That's right. 50,000 yuan. Not a cent less. Yun Shishir narrowed her eyes. Before she could say anything, the family members started chattering again. Not only this medical fee, but you also have to pay for my sister's subsequent hospitalization fees. Other than the medical fees, there's also the compensation for my sister's loss of work, nutrition, and psychological damage. How traumatized was my sister in this car accident? You have to compensate for all of this. So 50,000 yuan. Not a cent less. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. I can see it now. What do you mean? You're obviously trying to extort me, right? As soon as she said that, everyone was shocked. She continued, from the way you talk, I can tell that you're not very educated. You're simply spouting nonsense. Yes, I admit that I was careless when driving and accidentally hit you. I'll take responsibility for this, and I'll also admit to this mistake. I've also paid for the medical fees, but the doctor said that it's just some superficial injuries. These injuries can be treated with a few hundred yuan. I'm already very decent for compensating you with 15,000 yuan. Also, please don't use high blood pressure and high blood sugar to talk about this. Go and ask the doctor if hitting someone can cause high blood pressure and high blood sugar. These illnesses are not external injuries. Now you're pushing the blame on me and asking me to take responsibility. That doesn't make sense, does it? One of the most hot-tempered men rushed forward and pointed his finger at her. Are you slandering us? Are you slandering me? We're just asking for some compensation for the medical expenses, and you're saying that we're extorting you. As he spoke, he stepped forward and grabbed her hand, but Yun Shishir pushed his hand away warily. Just speak properly. Don't touch me. Get physical? Hee. Are you trying to frame me? Have we tried to reason with you? Wasn't he being reasonable? Are you listening? This man seemed to have a fierce temper. He looked very tall and very strong. The muscles on his arms, as well as his ferocious eyes, shocked Yun Shishir quite a bit. Yun Shishir was a little impatient, so she said, originally, I wanted to propose a private settlement and didn't want to bother about this matter. But since you said so, how about this? My car has car insurance. I'll call the insurance company and ask them to come over and take responsibility. Let's see how they deal with it, okay? As she spoke, she picked up her phone and walked to the side to call the insurance company. She had just dialed the number of the insurance company when the man strode forward and slapped her phone to the ground. Chapter 1745. The man pointed at her and said angrily, Are you trying to run away after hitting someone? What? Run away? Why would she run away? The other family members were also agitated. They swarmed forward and surrounded her. Each of them held one of her hands, and someone even went forward and snatched her handbag away. One of the women deliberately raised her voice and said, Are you trying to run away? Are you trying to run away after hitting someone? Yun Shishir was extremely helpless. Without waiting for her to explain further, the others surrounded Yun Shishir and shouted at the passers-by who were watching the commotion. Hey! Come and see. This woman hit someone and wants to run away without paying the medical fees. This is a hit and run. She wants to run away without paying the compensation. Everyone, come over and judge for us. Yun Shishir explained, I'm not running away. I'm making a call. Calling for help, right? Just like in the news, they asked the gangsters to bully honest migrant workers like us, right? Following their shouting, more and more passers-by came to watch. Many of the patients' family members who were waiting for their packages to be checked at the hospital saw that there was a situation here, so they all gathered around to see what was going on. Hence, these family members grabbed others and started to complain to them. We all came to the capital from Wuyang to work. My sister was working at a construction site and was hit by this woman on her way home. After a full body checkup, what was the result? It was very serious. This woman said that she didn't want to take responsibility and wanted to run away after making a call. Does this count as running away? That's right. Our family isn't doing well. There are 7 of us. My sister worked hard at the construction site to earn money to support the family. In the end, she was hit by an unexpected accident. Now she's lying in the hospital, and the family's expenses are cut off. Everyone, please be reasonable. We worked so hard to come to the capital to work, but we were hit by a car. Is it too much to ask her for compensation? It's not too much, right? Everyone was chattering away, one after another, one after another. Yoon Shirshir's family members had the advantage in numbers. Relying on their eloquence, they kept brainwashing the onlookers. She was outnumbered and felt like she was in a whirlpool. For a moment, she couldn't defend herself. She finally understood what it meant by, summer insects can't talk about ice. In an instant, the public opinion changed. Many onlookers began to point at Yoon Shirshir as they gossiped about her. Yoon Shirshir only felt her ears buzzing, as if countless flies were surrounding her ears. It was extremely noisy. Suddenly, someone in the crowd pointed at Yoon Shirshir and said, Yoon Shirshir. Ah, I recognize this woman. Hee hee. No wonder he looked so familiar. So she's a superstar. I recognize it too. Didn't you shoot an advertisement and appear in an international fashion show before? The family member said, so she's a big celebrity. Once they found out that Yoon Shirshir was a big celebrity, many people began to take pictures of Yoon Shirshir with their phones. Yoon Shirshir covered her face with her collar. However, her actions made more people think that she was obviously guilty. Chapter 1746. After a pause, the woman yelled again. So you're a superstar. I'm warning you. If you don't compensate us, I'll expose you to the media. How dare you not compensate us for our medical expenses when you caused a car accident? Can you let me call the insurance company? Even if you want me to compensate, you should at least let me withdraw the money, right? Yoon Shirshir was about to burst into tears from their unreasonable behavior. However, the family member said relentlessly, what do you mean withdraw the money? You're just trying to run away with the money, aren't you? Don't think we don't know what you're thinking. Despicable. Shameless. Yoon Shirshir was so angry that tears welled up in her eyes. When a scholar met a soldier, there was really no way to reason with him. On the other hand, Loo Jinyu had just walked into the emergency room lobby when he saw many people crowding outside. A delicate-looking woman stood in the middle of the crowd. Her face was flushed red as she looked around helplessly. This hospital was under the control of the Shangyu Financial Group. Previously, due to poor management, this hospital was later acquired by the Shangyu Financial Group as a non-performing asset. Under the management of the Shangyu Financial Group, it had become one of the leading hospitals in the medical industry in the capital city. He had come to the hospital this time because the hospital needed to import a large number of medical equipment. At the same time, he wanted to inspect the situation. When he was about to leave, he realized that the emergency room was surrounded by curious passers-by. Hence, he walked over to take a look out of curiosity. After finding out that a woman had hit someone, she wanted to run away without compensation. However, he was laughing in his heart. In this era, which car on the road didn't have commercial insurance? In the capital city market, most of the insurance shares for cars were at least 1,000,000 yuan. If the driver didn't run away on the spot after hitting someone, it meant that the driver was responsible. After calling the police and arriving at the hospital, the rest was up to the insurance company. How could she run away? Hence, he pushed through the crowd, cleared his throat, and said, Excuse me, may I interrupt? May I ask what's the situation? As soon as he finished speaking, the male family member shouted unreasonably, Who are you? It's not your place to interfere. However, Loo Jinyu smiled elegantly. In front of the unreasonable man, he was as polite as a gentleman. I'm the person in charge of this hospital. With so many of you gathered here, it will affect the hospital negatively. I definitely have the responsibility and obligation to understand the situation. After a pause, he calmly asked the man, Now, may I ask if I have the right to intervene in this matter? Upon hearing that Loo Jinyu was the person in charge of the hospital, the man immediately straightened his attitude. However, Loo Jinyu caught the fleeting look of guilt on his face. There seemed to be something fishy about this. Logically speaking, since he was a weakling, he should be confident. What did he have to feel guilty about? So he asked, What's going on? His politeness and excellent character made the people around him quiet down in an instant. The family members were also strangely quiet. Loo Jinyu glanced at Yoon Shirshir and saw that she was standing on the spot with her arms crossed. It was obvious that she had just experienced an intense friction. His gaze landed on her arm, only to see that there were scratches on the back of her hand and wrist that were exposed to the air. Chapter 1747. Why did it seem like she was the one being bullied? Hence, he asked gently, "Madam, can you explain the situation to me?" Yun Shirshir raised her head to look at him. She was subconsciously wary of him, but when she heard his gentle and courteous voice, she let her guard down and slowly said, "I bumped into someone and sent her to the hospital. I paid for her medical fees and did a full body checkup for her. The report said that she had a mild concussion and abrasions, but it wasn't particularly serious. So, I want to pay a few thousand yuan to settle the matter." A mild concussion sounds serious, but it's actually not a big deal. Generally speaking, even a slap can cause a concussion. It won't be much of a problem after some rest. As for the abrasions. At this point, Lu Jinyu smiled and said, "In the hospital, such injuries can be resolved with a maximum of 300 yuan. You're already being very responsible by paying a few thousand yuan." When Yun Shirshir heard his words, it was as if she had met her savior. Her eyes instantly turned red with grievance. "But the victim's family came over and asked me to pay 50,000 yuan. I felt that their request was too ridiculous and suspected that they were blackmailing me, so I said to call the insurance company and get them to settle it." Lu Jinyu asked, "Have you called the police?" When they heard that they were going to call the police, the family members suddenly became flustered. They looked at each other nervously. They couldn't help but want to go forward and try to befriend Lu Jinyu. However, Lu Jinyu politely stopped them. "Speak one by one, okay? I asked you just now, but you didn't say anything. I don't want to hear it now." Yun Shirshir sighed inwardly. This man looks gentle on the surface, but why is his style of speaking so domineering? As he spoke, he gave off the feeling that there was a knife hidden behind his smile and he was imposing without being angry. Lu Jinyu didn't know what she was thinking. He turned to look at her and said with a smile, "You haven't answered me yet." "I didn't call the police." "Silly girl, such a matter should be dealt with by the police immediately." Lu Jinyu asked again, "Then, have you called the insurance company?" Yun Shirshir said cruelly, "It's been a few years since I got my driver's license, but it's only been a month or so since I started driving. Encountering such a situation, I'm indeed a little confused." Lu Jinyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't you know that sometimes, when you're driving on the road, it's not the car that hits someone, but the person that hits the car?" "What do you mean?" "What a silly girl. Stand aside and don't say anything, okay?" Lu Jinyu raised an eyebrow. His elegant yet domineering way of speaking reminded her of Mu Yaja. He felt an inexplicable sense of security. She smiled gratefully, but didn't say anything else. Lu Jinyu walked up to a few family members. There were more than a dozen of them. Even if each of them said a word, it was enough to drown Yun Shirshir. There was no room for her to speak. Chapter 1748. Upon hearing that they were going to call the police, the few of them panicked. Only the man pretended to be calm and said, "I don't think there's a need to call the police, right? What can the police say? She was the one who injured her. Since she wants to take responsibility, why don't we just pay the compensation? As long as the compensation is paid, we won't pursue any responsibility." Lu Jinyu curled his lips and smiled. "How much is the compensation? 50,000 yuan?" "Yes." "Is 50,000 yuan a lot?" The man said, "She drives a Mercedes-Benz. Since she can afford to drive a Mercedes-Benz, 50,000 yuan shouldn't be a big deal to her. She won't lose anything by compensating her." Lu Jinyu nodded. Compensation is not a problem. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. She vaguely wondered if this man was helping her. Why did he say that compensation was not a problem? These people were obviously extorting her. He couldn't have believed their words, could he? When the family member heard this, he was about to nod in satisfaction when Lu Jinyu said, "But the amount you're asking for, I suspect that you're extorting her." Extorting her? Lu Jinyu's aura was so strong that it completely suppressed the scene. No one dared to interrupt him when he spoke. When the family member heard this, he was stunned and stared at him with wide eyes. "Don't you think it's too much to ask for 50,000 yuan as compensation for a soft tissue injury and a mild concussion? According to the law, this is already considered extortion. Furthermore, I suspect that you're fraudsters." The scene was very quiet, so the onlookers could hear Lu Jinyu's calm and rational offer. When they heard that these people were asking for 50,000 yuan as compensation, everyone came to a realization. After hearing Lu Jinyu's analysis, everyone started to discuss and wonder if these people were extorting her. Why would they have to pay 50,000 yuan for such a minor injury? Lu Jinyu continued, however, I don't have any evidence at all. When the family member heard this, he immediately argued, that's right. You have no evidence at all. What do you mean by extortion? We're all honest migrant workers. We wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Let me finish. Lu Jinyu said, there's no evidence, but there are surveillance cameras on the road now. We can call the police and get the surveillance footage. Then the truth will be revealed, won't it? The family members thought to themselves, we've met a smart man. Everyone looked at each other. For a moment, they were in a deadlock. Lu Jinyu picked up his cell phone and called the police. When those people heard that he was calling the police, they wanted to escape. However, they were stopped by the security guards who came to maintain order. The police soon arrived at the scene. Since Lu Jinyu had called the police station attached great importance to it. Hence, a police officer led the team. When he saw that it was Lu Jinyu, he said respectfully, Mr. Lu. Nice to meet you. May I ask? Lu Jinyu briefly explained the situation to them. The police quickly understood the situation. After a brief understanding of the situation, they brought these people back to the police station to record their statements. Yun Shishir was also informed to go to the police station. Before she left, she walked up to Lu Jinyu and thanked him sincerely. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know what to do. Chapter 1749. Yun Shishir nodded. What's your name? To show my gratitude, I'll treat you to a cup of tea when we're free. Lu Jinyu agreed. Sure. How could he reject a beautiful woman's invitation? Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. In his heart, he thought that maybe he could also be like his boss and have the hope of getting naked. Hence he said, my surname is Lu, and my name is Jinyu. You can call me Jinyu. Hello, Mr. Lu. Thank you so much for today. What about you? Lu Jinyu's gaze landed on her face. What's your name? Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir said generously. The next second, the smile on Lu Jinyu's face froze. Yun what? Yun Shishir's expression froze for a moment. Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir. He couldn't help but be surprised. What a familiar name. That seemed to be the name of his boss's wife. Could it be such a coincidence? Lu Jinyu hesitated for a moment and decided to verify it. Do you know Mu Yaja? Yun Shishir was also stunned. Yes. Lu Jinyu was speechless. After holding it in for a long time, he suddenly said, Sister-in-law. Yun Shishir was confused by his sudden call of sister-in-law. She sized him up in confusion. What did you call me? Sister-in-law. Lu Jinyu smiled helplessly. It seemed that his dream of breaking through his singlehood was shattered. After so many turns, it turned out to be his sister-in-law. It seemed that the world was really small sometimes. Ah. Yun Shishir was still in a daze. She asked curiously, have we met somewhere before? Ha ha ha. Sister-in-law, why are you so cute? Lu Jinyu thought to himself. When he first saw this woman, his first impression was that she was a little clumsy and silly. She stood helplessly in the crowd like a punching bag who had been bullied. Her face was flushed red, and she was out of her wits. However, he didn't expect that after going around in circles, it was his sister-in-law. Let's go. Sister-in-law, let me treat you to a cup of tea. Lu Jinyu put his arm around her shoulders intimately. Facing the intimate touch of the opposite sex, she avoided him in disgust. You must have mistaken me for someone else. I'm not your sister-in-law. Mu Yaja is my elder brother. According to seniority, I should address you as my sister-in-law, Lu Jinyu said matter-of-factly. Mu Yaja is your big brother? Yes. What a coincidence. Yun Shishir looked a little confused. What coincidence? Haha. I'm a little surprised too. I didn't expect to meet you here. Thank you. But forget about the tea, I still have to go to the police station later. No need. If you go to the police station, it's just a procedure. I'll just let them file it. Lu Jinyu invited her into the car without any explanation. Along the way, Yun Shirshir felt like she was in a fantasy. Why did she feel like a little white rabbit that was so easily abducted by a big bad wolf with bad intentions? When they reached the cafe, Yun Shirshir was still a little skeptical. It was not until Lu Jinyu took out an engagement invitation from his briefcase that she believed him. She had personally written the invitation letter. After ordering a few cups of coffee, Lu Jinyu lost his cool and elegance. He couldn't hide the excitement on his face as he stared at Yun Shirshir again and again. So, this was the legendary sister-in-law. She was very different from what he had imagined. Chapter 1750. If Yun Shirshir knew what Lu Jinyu thought of her, she would probably not know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that Lu Jinyu was silently sizing her up, Yun Shirshir felt uncomfortable all over and smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Lu, you seem to be looking at me." "Mr. Lu?" Lu Jinyu was once again amused by how she addressed him. He couldn't help but tease her. "Sister-in-law, you don't have to be so formal. Just call me Jinyu." "Jinyu? Yes, but..." Yun Shirshir hesitated and pursed her lips. "Isn't this a little inappropriate?" "Why would it be inappropriate? Just call me that. Calling me Mr. Lu will inevitably make me feel distant." Lu Jinyu picked up his coffee cup and took a sip. His eyes were curved like two crescent moons, clear and charming. Unlike his previous cold and noble demeanor, the current him seemed very approachable. "You and my boss have been brothers for many years. We can be considered comrades who have fought together. We've been friends for so many years, so don't be so formal." Yun Shirshir didn't argue and smiled slightly. Lu Jinyu pursed his lips, but his smiling eyes were still sizing her up. Yun Shirshir instinctively reached out and touched her cheek, thinking that there was something strange on her face. Seeing her actions, Lu Jinyu thought to himself that he had probably overstepped his boundaries by constantly sizing her up. Hence, he smiled politely and said, "Sister-in-law, Jinyu is being presumptuous. I shouldn't be staring at you like that." "It's okay. However, I'm staring at you not because of anything else, but because I'm really curious about the charm of the woman that boss has taken a fancy to." Yun Shirshir's gaze shifted slightly. For a moment, she didn't understand what he meant. Lu Jinyu was afraid that her imagination would run wild, so he hurriedly explained, "Sister-in-law, don't misunderstand. Although it's a little presumptuous, I don't mean anything else. But, sister-in-law, do you know? You're boss's first and only woman. At first when I found out that boss was married, I was so shocked that my eyeballs almost popped out." Yun Shirshir was amused by his funny words. She covered her mouth and laughed secretly. How can it be so exaggerated? How should I put it? In his impression, the boss was an ambitious person. He was cold-blooded and iron-fisted. His actions were swift and decisive. His abilities were extraordinary. Those who coveted his women would flock to him like a flock of ducks. I'm not exaggerating. The number of women who want to climb up the social ladder can line up from here to Paris. However, boss has always been cold and aloof. In terms of women, he has never touched anything. Lu Jinyu had always been curious. Did Mu Yaja not have any physical needs? In his memory, his impression of Mu Yaja was that of a workaholic. Work. Apart from work, he was busy. When the Shengyu Financial Group was first established, he spent half of the year flying around the world. He was so busy that he didn't have any free time. Apart from work, Mu Yaja's occasional hobbies were probably to play billiards, golf, or go to the fencing gym to pass the time. This routine and hobbies. No matter how he looked at it, he suspected that he was middle-aged. He was only 28 years old, but he was like an old cadre. He didn't have the vigor of a young man at all. Chapter 1751. Back then, Lu Jinyu had also developed some mischievous interests. He deliberately hid his purpose and took Mu Yaja to the bar to hunt for women. The problem was that when they arrived at the bar, Mu Yaja was like an ice block. He just sat in the private room and drank silently, as if he had nothing to do with it. He silently watched the men and women in the bar dance without restraint. His cold expression was a stark contrast to the drunken demeanor of the people in the bar. From the private room he was sitting in, it was almost as if he was in two different worlds from the dance floor. One side was in full swing, while the other side was cold. Lu Jinyu thought to himself, boss really doesn't know how to enjoy life. At such an occasion, he was not in a hurry to catch his prey. Instead, he was calm and composed. Like a profound veteran, he sat in the corner and casually tasted his wine. When it came to his career, he was very ambitious. Why did he seem so indifferent when it came to women? Men all had their biological needs. Could it be that boss had no feelings for women at all? But she had never seen him show any interest in any man before. Lu Jinyu even suspected that his boss was frigid. Of course, this was just a silent criticism in his heart. If Mu Yaja knew that he thought of him that way, who knew what he would do to him? Lu Jinyu had also found a few women with clean backgrounds for Mu Yaja. He sent them to his side, but they were all mercilessly chased away by him. After a futile effort, Lu Jinyu simply gave up. He thought that boss was probably devoted to his career and did not have the heart to care about other things. However, it was not until recently that he learned that Mu Yaja was married. This news was like a sudden clap of thunder that blasted him on the outside and made him tender on the inside. That was why Lu Jinyu was so curious about Yun Shirshir. Sister-in-law, you're different from what I imagined. Lu Jinyu told Yun Shirshir truthfully. Different? Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. What's different? I thought that boss's woman would be the daughter of a rich family, noble and proud. But the feeling you give me is like... Like what? Yun Shirshir was a little curious. What did he think of her? Don't be angry if I tell you. I'm not angry. Lu Jinyu held back his laughter and said, like a little white rabbit. Little? Yun Shirshir was at a loss for words. Lu Jinyu couldn't help but laugh at her adorable expression. Haha, that's the expression, it's so similar. Why do you say that I'm like a little white rabbit? Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looks very weak, like she would fall with a gust of wind. She looks very easy to bully. However, it's not strange that boss likes you. Sister-in-law gives people the feeling that she can easily arouse a man's desire to protect her. Lu Jinyu paused for a moment before asking, you're about to hold your engagement ceremony. I'm sincerely happy for you and boss. I believe in boss foresight. Since he has chosen you, he will protect you forever. I wish you all happiness. Yun Shirshir smiled. Thank you. The police station called to ask why Yun Shirshir hadn't arrived at the police station. Lu Jinyu took the call and explained the situation. The police officer on the other end chuckled and said, hey, actually, it's not a big deal. Since she's Mr. Lu's friend, this matter is very easy to handle. Chapter 1752. Lu Jinyu took the call and explained the situation. The police officer on the other end chuckled and said, hey, actually, it's not a big deal. Since they're Mr. Lu's friends, this matter will be easy to handle. It turned out that those people were a gang of Pengzi scammers. They had been committing Pengzi for more than a dozen times. This gang was especially interesting. They didn't touch anything else but luxury cars. They didn't even look at cars that cost more than 100,000 yuan. They were certain that since they drove luxury cars, they would definitely be rich. When encountering such a matter, they definitely wouldn't want to waste any time. If they could solve it with money, they would try their best to keep the peace and not be calculative. Such rich people were especially easy to deal with. Tens of thousands of yuan were nothing to them. They had already committed more than a dozen crimes, and none of them had failed. Their usual routine was to stand at the intersection of the street and see a luxury car driving over. If the car was slow, they would pounce on it like a moth to a flame. Then, they would crash into the car and beg the car owner to send them to the hospital. Even if the car owner wanted to call the police to deal with it, when they saw the person lying on the ground and rolling around in pain, they were afraid that the loss would outweigh the gain if they delayed and caused a death. Hence, they rushed to the hospital. They called the gang to disguise themselves as family members, do a full body checkup, and ask for a sum of compensation to settle the matter privately. Most people couldn't be bothered to make a fuss and just settled the matter with money. Unfortunately, they met Lu Jinyu today, and he was in control of the situation. That was why they stumbled and fell into Lu Jinyu's hands. Hence, Yun Shirshir was also very grateful to Lu Jinyu for helping her out. After hanging up the call, Lu Jinyu found that her phone screen was cracked, so he said that he would go to the mall to buy her a new phone. Yun Shirshir hurriedly refused. However, Lu Jinyu was very insistent and said to her, since this happened on my territory, as the person in charge, I naturally have to take responsibility. Sister-in-law, this is what I should do. Don't stand on ceremony, okay? Yun Shirshir couldn't refuse, so she braced herself and nodded. Lu Jinyu drove her to the mall. As she was a public figure, it wasn't appropriate for her to appear in crowded places. Hence, he considerately asked her to wait in the car and hurriedly left. 10 minutes later, he came back with the latest model of Apple. He helped her send the information and changed the card. Yun Shirshir smiled gratefully. Thank you for your help today. Sister-in-law, if you continue to treat me like an outsider, I'm going to get angry with you. Lu Jinyu pretended to be angry. In the end, Lu Jinyu drove her home and got someone to drive her car back. Coincidentally, Mu Yaja returned home, and the three of them bumped into each other. When Mu Yaja got out of the car, he saw the car parked at the entrance of the villa. Lu Jinyu was holding Yun Shirshir's hand and helping her out of the car. His gaze landed on Lu Jinyu's hand that was supporting Yun Shirshir, and his eyes turned cold instantly. As soon as Lu Jinyu turned around, he saw Mu Yaja standing behind him. Mu Yaja's cold gaze landed on his hand, which was wrapped around Yun Shirshir's shoulder. He felt as if he was being pricked by needles. He was so scared that he instinctively retracted his hand and smiled awkwardly. B-boss. Damn it. Oh no. How could it be so unlucky? Ah. Did boss misunderstand that he was deliberately taking advantage of sister-in-law? Chapter 1753. His gaze was like a tiger eyeing its prey, as if he was a lord whose territory had been invaded by other lions. His gaze gradually turned cold, as if he wanted to strangle someone into nothingness. But he was greatly wronged. The car he was driving was a George Patton, which was very tall. Hence, he was afraid that Yun Shirshir would lose her balance after getting out of the car in high heels. Thus, he kindly helped to support her. If he was mistaken for taking advantage of her, he would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. When Yun Shirshir saw Mu Yaja, she was stunned. You're back, Chief. However, Lu Jinyu looked like he wanted to say something. He thought that he should at least explain something, but if he did, it would seem like he was trying to hide something. It was a little too obvious. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Mu Yaja stared at him coldly. Why are you here? His tone was so cold that it made Lu Jinyu shiver. He said with a long face. Something happened, so I sent sister-in-law back on the way. What happened? Yun Shirshir immediately explained. Lu Jinyu looked as aggrieved as a deer, blinking innocently at him. After hearing the whole story, Mu Yaja's expression gradually softened. Seeing that his face had regained some warmth, Lu Jinyu heaved a sigh of relief. Since you've sent her back, you should go back. Mu Yaja walked forward and pulled Yun Shirshir into his arms. Looking at him, he mercilessly asked him to leave. Lu Jinyu felt as if a knife had been stabbed in his heart. Chief, I just arrived, and you're chasing me away? Aren't you going to ask me to stay for a cup of tea? You can drink tea any time. We don't lack this bit of effort. Mu Yaja's tone was firm. When Lu Jinyu heard this, he could only give up. He nodded and smiled helplessly. All right. I won't ask you to stay. I'll leave first. After that, he said goodbye to Yun Shirshir and drove away. Mu Yaja brought Yun Shirshir into the house. As soon as he stepped through the door, he asked in a deep voice, Why didn't you call me immediately after something like this happened? There was an inexplicable anger in his question. Even though she explained it casually, Mu Yaja's heart ached when he heard it. This stupid woman was so small. She was surrounded by so many people in such a situation. She was pointed at and bullied by so many people. She didn't know how helpless she was. She should have called him as soon as possible. As her man, the first person to stand up for her when she was in trouble wasn't him. This more or less made him a little angry. Yun Shirshir saw that he seemed to be angry and knew that he was worried. She stuttered a little and replied, I might have been a little confused at the time. Confused? Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, You're usually so sharp-tongued. Why? Were you confused when you were bullied by outsiders? There were so many of them. They surrounded me. At that time my mind was blank. Besides, how could I have thought of calling you for help at that time? If I didn't think of me when I was in trouble, who else could I think of? Chapter 1754. It's all in the past. Don't be angry. I'm fine now. Yun Shirshir paused and said, besides, you have a lot of work to do. What if you're busy when I call you? Won't that disturb you? Little idiot. Mu Yaja knocked on her head and enunciated each word clearly. Remember this. No matter how important it is, it's not as important as you. Yun Shirshir was stunned. Although his tone was stiff, it warmed her heart. He said, no matter how important it is, it's not as important as me. It turned out that she was so important to this man. She was more important than his career and everything else in the world. Hearing him say this, her heart felt as sweet as honey. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and giggled. Mu Yaja saw that she was giggling like a cat that had stolen a fish. He couldn't help but reach out and pinch her cheeks. What are you giggling about? Little idiot. Yun Shirshir waved his hand away and said coquettishly, all right. Don't be angry. I'll be more careful next time. I promise. That's more like it. Mu Yaja said, just remember this in the future. However, even if you forgot to call me, you should have called the police immediately when there was a traffic accident. What were you thinking in that little head of yours? At that time, I saw someone fall onto the ground. It was so pitiful. I was afraid that someone would die, so I wanted to rush to the hospital. Mu Yaja was speechless. Then, I wanted to call the police, but my cell phone was knocked to the ground by them and broke. Yun Shirshir sighed as she said this. Mu Yaja was speechless. After a long silence he sighed. Stupid woman. I think you're hopelessly stupid. Hey. No personal attacks. How am I stupid? If I were stupid, how could I have given birth to such a smart baby like you? You inherited my excellent IQ genes. As for your IQ, please refer to Xiao Yichen. Mu Yaja calmly stated the truth. Yun Shirshir. Was that really the case? Yun Shirshir sniffed her nose as if she had suffered a blow. She was obviously provoked. Mu Yaja turned around and smiled. He suddenly raised his head and rubbed her hair. But, this is also good. Okay. Yun Shirshir was confused. What's good about it? Mu Yaja said gently. It's better if you're a little stupid. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Do you like how clumsy I am? Yes. She was even more surprised. Why? Because you'll need me more if you're a little stupid. Mu Yaja gently caressed her cheeks. The love and tenderness in his eyes warmed her heart even more. He liked the feeling of being relied on by her all the time. In the past, he always felt that it was better for women to be a little smarter. But that was until he met her. He liked how clumsy she was. When he looked at her, a strong desire to protect her grew from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to hold her in his palms, love her, and protect her. No one could covet her. It didn't matter if she was a little stupid. He would become her entire world. Even if this world was a dog-eat-dog world, he would use his own strength to stand at the top of the strong. He would build a city for her and protect her. Yun Shirshir was touched and hugged his shoulders. Chapter 1755. So what? As Mu Yaja spoke, he inadvertently caught a glimpse of a scratch on her arm. His eyes darkened as he abruptly grabbed her hand and looked for her wound. He looked up and asked her, what happened? There were many scratches on her arm, wrist, and the back of her hand. Although the wounds weren't deep and were just scratches, it was obvious that someone had scratched them with their fingernails. Seeing this, his brows furrowed deeply. What exactly happened? How did you injure your hand? I was scratched by someone. Of course I can tell that it's a scratch. Mu Yaja sounded a little anxious. Who scratched you? It's those people. The police said that they were a group of scammers. When we were arguing at the hospital, they wouldn't let me go and scratched me. Mu Yaja's gaze instantly turned cold and his face darkened. Yun Shirshir immediately said, it's just a scratch. It's not serious. How is the scratch not serious? What if they have germs on them? How can it be that serious? Yun Shirshir was frightened by him. You're too careless. Don't come into contact with others when you're outside. Some people have germs on them that can be infected through wounds. These words were indeed not to scare her. Mu Yaja held her hand and pulled her to the sofa. He took the first aid kit from the shelf and opened it. He dipped some cotton in the medicine and started to clean her wound. Yun Shirshir found it funny and helpless at the same time. This man was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just a scratch. Why did he have to go to such lengths to apply medicine? However, she was still quite touched by his attentiveness and consideration. She sat quietly on the sofa while he knelt on one knee in front of her and carefully used the medicine to clean her wound bit by bit. Yun Shirshir was naturally very pleased to let him serve her so condescendingly. She lowered her head to look at him. From her angle, she could just catch a glimpse of his drooping eyelashes. They were thick, long and mesmerizing. She couldn't help but reach out and catch his eyelashes. Mu Yaja looked up at her. "What's wrong? Your eyelashes are really long. It's so beautiful." Yun Shirshir was in a good mood. When she smiled, she was as innocent as a child. Mu Yaja couldn't help but be infected by her smile. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curve into a light arc, and his mood also improved a bit. Yun Shirshir laughed at him. "Eyelash fairy." Mu Yaja. Stupid woman. Other than these 3 words, he really didn't know what else to say. Furthermore, what did mascara spirit mean? Yun Shirshir glanced at his face and knew that he definitely didn't know what the word meant. She kindly explained, "You don't understand the trend, right? Eyelash spirit means that the eyelashes have grown into a spirit." Mu Yaja. After applying the medicine for her, he reminded her, "Remember not to touch the wound. There are some areas that are bleeding." Yun Shirshir glanced at him and smiled. "You're done applying the medicine?" She immediately assumed a dignified posture like an emperor. "Then you may rise." Mu Yaja. Looking at his stern face, she really enjoyed the inexplicable sense of accomplishment when she teased him. Sometimes this man was also very cute. Chapter 1756. Good hubby. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. These 3 words were very pleasing to his ears. Originally, he was unhappy when she teased him, but because of these 3 intimate words, the corners of his lips uncontrollably curled up. He pulled her into his arms and continued the kiss that he didn't get to enjoy just now. With his lips on hers, he suddenly asked in a deep voice, "What kind of wedding gown do you like?" It was such a sudden question that she was a little stunned. "Little fool. I asked you what kind of wedding gown you like." He thought that she didn't hear him clearly, so he controlled his temper and repeated it again. "Wedding gown. Why are you suddenly asking about this? You're going to wear it when we get married." Mu Yaja looked at her as if she was a hopeless fool. "Why? Don't you want to wear a wedding gown? Or do you not want to marry me?" "No." Yun Shirshir blushed and refuted, "I didn't mean that. I just think that your question is too sudden. Since I'm going to marry you, the wedding gown will naturally be indispensable. Your wedding gown needs to be custom-made in advance, so I wanted to ask you, what kind of wedding gown do you like?" Mu Yaja explained. "Is a custom-made one especially expensive? That's not something you should be thinking about. You just have to think about what kind of gown you like and what kind of gown looks good on you." After all, they were only going to get married once in a lifetime, so it had to be grand. He also hoped that on that day, she would wear the most beautiful wedding gown in the world and appear in front of him. Yun Shirshir frowned. "Your question is too sudden. I haven't thought about it yet." She suddenly looked up and asked, "What about you? Do you have a wedding gown you like?" Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "Stupid. I'm asking you. Why are you asking me instead? You're the one wearing the wedding gown, not me." Yun Shirshir felt wronged. "That's true, but your opinion is more important. Although I'm the one wearing the wedding dress, I hope you like it." Mu Yaja smiled softly and teased her. "As long as you like it, I like it. I'm marrying you as a person, not a wedding dress." She didn't say anything, but her heart was filled with sweetness. Let me think about it. In fact, she used to have many beautiful dreams for weddings. Her biggest hope was to dress up grandly and wear a beautiful wedding dress to marry the man she loved. But when the day really came, she couldn't say for a moment what style she liked. She hadn't studied it at all. There are a few types of wedding dresses. One type is Chinese, such as the qipao or the hanfu. It combines many elements of classical culture. Some are more retro, and some are more modern. The other one is Western style, but there are many styles of Western-style wedding dresses. They are very complicated, and you will be dazzled by them. Yun Shirshir was stunned by his words. You seem to know a lot about wedding dresses. Not really. But I went out of my way to find out more. Although he said that, she knew in her heart that he was paying special attention because of her. Yun Shirshir's ears were a little red. Chapter 1757. There are Western-style wedding gowns. Some are retro and gorgeous, some are graceful and elegant, and some are noble and elegant. The custom-made wedding gowns will all be extremely luxurious. It all depends on what you choose. But as long as you wear it, no matter what style it is, I will like it. Women were naturally picky when it came to wedding gowns. No matter which woman it was, they all hoped to be the most beautiful bride in the world on their wedding day. Yun Shirshir was no exception. But there were very few men who paid so much attention to the details of their wedding. There were also very few men who were so patient that they would go through every style of wedding gown. She remembered one of her colleagues. When she was nearing her wedding day, she excitedly took her fiancé to the bridal shop to choose a gown. However, she tried on one gown after another. She patiently tried on a few different styles of wedding gowns and asked her fiancé to make a judgment. But in return, her fiancé looked at her impatiently. He said, "It's just a wedding. Is there a need to go through such a complicated process? The wedding gown is just a formality. It's worn during the wedding. You won't wear it again after wearing it once. Is there a need to choose so carefully?" In front of so many people, her colleague felt so wrong that her eyes turned red. They parted on the spot on bad terms. If a custom-made wedding gown is expensive, there's actually no need to do so. I think I look good in anything. What's important is that you like it, understand? Mu Yaja emphasized this point. There's no need to save money for me. It's only once in a lifetime. How can I let you suffer? Yun Shirshir smiled sweetly, but she felt as sweet as honey. She wanted to say, Mu Yaja, how can you dote on me so much? You're going to spoil me so much that I don't know the immensity of heaven and earth and forget myself. But when the words reached her mouth, she swallowed them back down. Wasn't it a blissful thing to be doted on by someone? Hence, she said, actually, I like quite a lot of styles. I've seen a wedding dress show before, and I really like a Western-style wedding dress that incorporates classic Chinese elements. The wedding dress she had her eyes on was not a traditional Chinese dress. It was an off-shoulder wedding dress with a long hemline that reached the ground, like a charming lily in full bloom. The neckline and cuffs were designed with Chinese Sioux embroidery. It had both the elegance and romance of French and the unique charm and elegance of the East. It was very beautiful. Since you have an idea, that's good. When the time comes, I'll contact a few wedding dress designers for you. You can tell them your idea and see how they design it. After the design is done, you only need to be responsible for choosing. They were going to custom make a wedding dress for her. Yun Shirshir was so touched that she didn't know what to do. She just nodded with a silly smile. All right. At night, she sorted out the invitations that she had yet to send out. Her gaze suddenly fell on one of the more exquisite invitations. On the name of the guest, she neatly filled in the two words, Gong Jia. Would he come to her engagement party? She really wanted to receive his blessings. At the thought of this, Yun Shirshir picked up her cell phone and called Gong Jia. The call went through very quickly. Xiao Jia, where are you? Sis, what's the matter? Yun Shirshir said, I have something for you. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then, a cold voice came through. Is it an invitation? Yes, it is. Chapter 1758. Upon hearing this, Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. She had thought that this was an excuse for him not to attend the engagement ceremony. Hence, the loneliness in her heart was reflected in her tone of voice. Xiao Jia, are you still unwilling to attend my engagement ceremony? After 15 years of separation, she cherished the sibling relationship that she had lost and regained. But at the same time, she also hoped that her happiness would be blessed by the person closest to her in the world. Gong Jia was as important to her as Little Munchkin. Sis, I have something urgent to attend to in America. I just got off the plane and am not in the country. After a pause, Gong Jia continued, As for the engagement ceremony, can you give me some time to consider it? Gong Jia sounded a little helpless on the other end of the line. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Then, she smiled a little dejectedly. Xiao Jia, I won't force you or make things difficult for you. Whether you come or not, I will reserve a place for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He didn't say a word, and she didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, Gong Jie said, "Okay, got it." After hanging up the phone, Yun Shishir sighed. Even though Gong Jie had promised her well, she didn't know if he would come on that day. Now that he was overseas, she was afraid that this meticulously prepared invitation wouldn't reach him. Yun Shishir pursed her lips. She opened the drawer and put the invitation inside. The next day, Mu Yaja sent someone to send Yun Shishir to the set and then went to the office. When Yun Shishir returned from the set, the chauffeur sent by Mu Yaja sent her to the bridal gown shop. Lover. A professional custom-made gown. Even though it was just an engagement ceremony and there was no need to wear a wedding gown, this gown was still necessary. Mu Yaja had left the meeting early and was waiting for her in the shop. He had considered things more thoroughly, so he had arranged things very carefully. As soon as Yun Shishir stepped into the store, she was invited into the VIP room by the manager of the dress hall. First she was measured. After taking the measurements, the manager was surprised and exclaimed, "Miss Yun, your figure is the golden ratio. A figure like yours is a classic clothes hanger. You can do any style of gown." For a moment, she could not tell if he meant what he said or if he was just being polite, so she replied politely, "He. You flatter me." "I'm not flattering you. I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. When we make custom-made gowns, we pay the most attention to the proportion of the body. The more perfect a person's figure was, the better they looked in clothes. The fewer restrictions there are." At the side, a few shop assistants also surrounded her and took some measurements for her. For example, the size of the wrist, the size of the shoulder, the size of the shoulder. Lover was a famous custom-made gown shop in the capital. Many celebrities and socialites chose their gowns from this shop. The reason why they were so famous in the industry was because of 3 words: exquisite, exquisite, and exclusive. Every gown was handmade and the size and size were exactly the same. Even the slightest mistake of 0.1 millimeters was not allowed to happen. Hence, the gowns made by this shop never failed to fit. They were all custom-made. Chapter 1759. There was only one ready-made dress per design. Once the customer picked the dress, it would no longer be sold. Among the upper-class socialites, including the A-list celebrities in the entertainment industry, no matter if they were attending important business events or public events, walking the red carpet, or filming a blockbuster, no one would be indifferent to wearing the same dress as another person. It would be quite embarrassing. It was not scary to wear the same dress, but it would be embarrassing to see who was uglier. In order to avoid such embarrassment, everyone would want to wear the only custom-made dress. Therefore, it could be said that every dress from Lover was custom-made and one of a kind in the world. Of course, the price of the gowns in this shop was naturally not cheap. After taking measurements, Yun Shishir walked out of the shop. She saw Mu Yaja sitting on the sofa and flipping through the album. She walked over and sat beside him to take a look. She saw that he was holding the works of Lover's top designers. Some of them were concept drawings, while others were samples that had already been made. Of course, the so-called album was different from the pictures that could be found on the internet. The concept drawings were all meticulously designed, polished, harmonized, and rendered. Every detail was vividly displayed. As for the final product, every detail, including the design of the cuffs, collar, and waist, was accurately photographed in high definition. It was for the customers to read carefully. As for the fabric, there were some samples at the end of the album so that the customers could feel the texture with their own hands and choose the material that they liked. There was a thick stack of album in front of Mu Yaja. It was very thick and very heavy. Yun Shishir held the album in her hands. It was so heavy that she frowned. "Did you pick anything?" She looked up and asked him as she flipped through the album. Mu Yaja frowned and shook his head. He was picky and paid attention to details. Originally, he did not want to participate in the process of choosing the dress. However, she said that she hoped that he would like the dress that she wore. Since that was the case, he would personally participate in the process of choosing the dress. Since he entered the shop, he had already flipped through 3 albums. However, there were only a few designs that he liked, but he was not satisfied with any of them. Among the few models that he liked, there were also many details that he was not satisfied with. However, they weren't in a hurry. If there wasn't anything they were satisfied with, they could continue to choose. There had to be one that both of them liked. If there really wasn't any, it wouldn't be a problem to get the designer to rush out the design. After Yoon Shurshur sat down, the manager led a few designers over. Yoon Shurshur was not a professional when it came to choosing a wedding dress, so the manager specially brought a few designers to explain to her. Formal attire might seem simple, but when it was worn on the body, the first thing that was important was its beauty, the second was its material, and the third was its comfort. Some low-quality gowns did not fit well. Some people with sensitive skin would have an allergic reaction when they touched some low-quality fabric. A few designers flipped through the album and showed it to her and Mu Yaja as they explained it in detail. At first, Yoon Shurshur only understood half of it, but later on, she gradually understood some of the details. Finally, after some discussion, the two of them decided on a set of formal attire. Chapter 1760. A red Chinese-style gown was more festive. On this point, the two of them were surprisingly in agreement. However, this gown was not a classic one. It was stylish and beautiful. Yoon Shurshur took a liking to it at first glance. Mu Yaja gave the manager a deadline. As the date of the engagement was approaching, the gown had to be made as soon as possible. The manager repeatedly promised that the gown would be delivered before the engagement under the condition that the quality and quantity of the gown were guaranteed. Yoon Shurshur sent out the last few invitations. Of course, Xiang Yu, Yoon Qingmiao, and Xiang Yu also received an invitation. The invitations were exquisitely made, and each one was handwritten by Yoon Shurshur. The date and place of the engagement were written in it. It also stated that 2 nights before the engagement, Mu Yaja would use his private jet to bring the groom's and bride's invited guests to the island. The moment Yoon Qingmiao received the invitation and saw the envelope, she was dumbfounded. Mom, who exactly is Yoon Shurshur's man? He actually has his own private jet. Yoon Qinli was also in disbelief. Gosh, I used to think that Yoon Shurshur's man could only be considered as Yin Fu, but now it seems that his identity is definitely not ordinary. He actually has his own private jet. How rich must he be to own such a thing? In their eyes, only the super-rich could afford a private jet. What they did not know was that Mu Yaja had a total of 5 private jets under his name. 2 of them were especially luxurious VIP jets, which were used to pick up important VIPs during business negotiations. You are one of the private jets that will be used for the engagement. Yoon Qingmiao was so jealous that she could die. A few days ago, she had just seen the trailer for the movie, The Green Apple, on TV. At first, when she saw the beautifully edited promotional video on TV, she felt that it looked familiar. At first, she thought that it was just a coincidence. Later, the movie channel specially broadcasted the special feature and invited the director and the various main cast members to do an exclusive interview. They also edited some of the movie's highlights. When Yoon Shurshur appeared on the screen, her name was clearly written at the bottom of the screen. Only then did Yoon Qingmiao believe that her distant cousin was actually a superstar. Yoon Qingmiao was not a fan of celebrities, but Yoon Qinli especially liked to watch idol dramas. Naturally, like many young girls, she especially admired Gu Xingze. When she saw Yoon Shurshur and Gu Xingze smiling as they sat together for an interview, she went into a frenzy. Yoon Shurshur was actually a superstar. Moreover, she and Gu Xingze had starred in a teen movie. What's more, the main cast of this movie was a gold medal team. Not only that, when she searched for Yoon Shurshur's name, a few topics popped up. Surprisingly, one of them was a popular reality TV show, The Love Diary. She stayed up all night and watched all 3 episodes of the show. For 3 whole days, she could not sleep in peace. She was excited. She was excited. She was excited because she did not expect that her beloved idol would be so close to her one day. Chapter 1761. Yoon Qinli especially wanted Gu Xingze's autograph. If there was a chance, she could use Yoon Shurshur to get to know Gu Xingze in person. This was something she dared not even dream of. If she could use Yoon Shurshur to enter the entertainment industry, would she not be able to get closer to her idol? Yoon Qinli was so delusional that she did not even have the mood to look for a job. All she wanted was to find an opportunity to enter the entertainment industry. Yoon Qingmiao, on the other hand, did not chase after celebrities, but unlike her sister, she harbored another thought in her heart. It turned out that Yoon Shurshur's fiancé was so rich. Not only was he handsome and tall, but his family background was also so superior. How exactly did Yoon Shurshur manage to hook up with such a perfect man? If she had such a boyfriend, she would wake up laughing even in her dreams. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, did not pay attention to these. The only thing she was concerned about was that since Yun Shishir was a celebrity and had such a rich fiancé, her family background should be extremely superior. She was focused on scheming. If she could hook up with Yun Shishir's family, given her relationship with Yun Shishir, they could be considered distant cousins. With such a rich cousin, she would not have to worry about glory and wealth for the rest of her life. In short, the three mother and daughter each had their own ulterior motives and different ambitions. Yun Qinli gave Yun Shishir a call and indirectly asked her how she could enter the entertainment industry and become a celebrity like her. How could Yun Shishir not understand the hidden meaning in her words? Alas, she was too busy preparing for the engagement, so she did not have the time to care about her. She gave a perfunctory reply and did not say much more. Yun Qinli was not discouraged, though. She thought to herself that she would discuss this matter with her after the engagement ceremony. She wanted to see if she could use her connections to open a back door for her to sneak into the production team and play a role. Who knew? She might become famous overnight. There was no telling. She might even become more famous than Yun Shishir. Yun Qinli was so delusional that she could not settle down for a few days. The engagement ceremony was held on an island because Mu Yaja had considered many aspects before making this decision. Firstly, there was a castle on the island. After fetching the family and friends, the 2-day and 2-night celebration banquet would be relatively convenient, and there would be a private jet to shuttle them back and forth. More importantly, his wife had always dreamed of having a beach wedding. She had never mentioned these dreams but had written them down in her diary. He took a glance at it and memorized it in his heart. Although it was just an engagement ceremony, it was still a dream come true. He hoped that the engagement ceremony would be grand, but at the same time, it had a confidential atmosphere. There weren't many guests, but they were all important guests with deep connections. If they held an engagement ceremony on an island, not only would they not be disturbed, they could also ensure the safety of these guests. One had to know that many of the invitees to the engagement banquet were international politicians, even aristocrats and celebrities. They were the leaders of various countries. In 2 weeks' time, the arrangements on the island were completed. Mu Yaja had invested a lot of manpower and energy in this aspect. Chapter 1762. His personality dictated that as long as he was involved in something, he would naturally strive for perfection. He did not like things with flaws, not to mention this was such an important moment in his life. He would not allow any mistakes in any part of the process. On the day of the wedding, he even sent out strict security. Even though it was on an island, he had to be alert to any possibility of an emergency. The venue was heavily guarded. Without an invitation, no one could enter. 2 nights before the engagement ceremony, Yun Shishir was suddenly so nervous that she could not sleep well. Mu Yaja had already flown to the island. The next day, he would send out a private jet to pick up all the guests. As for her, as the bride-to-be, another private jet would be sent to pick her up. She could not help but be curious and asked why. Mu Yaja mysteriously said, "You are my fiancé. Of course you have to maintain a sense of mystery." Yun Shishir was amused by him and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Lying on the bed, she tossed and turned restlessly. Hugging the pillow, she recalled everything that had happened between her and Mu Yaja ever since they met. Every scene flooded into her mind, but it gave her the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. Fate was unpredictable. Perhaps she was born lucky to have met him and used up all her life's luck. When they first met, he was her employer. What about her? She was merely his surrogate mother. When they first met, they were still strangers. Then, she gave herself to him without any reservations. Out of helplessness, that was also the lowest point of her life. However, at that time, she did not expect that the man she was so afraid of that night would actually be her husband in the future. Fate was something that could not be explained clearly. However, fate was like this. If there was a slight mistake at every step, they could miss each other. Yun Shishir was sincerely grateful that they were able to come this far. The engagement ceremony was imminent. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were also excited. Xiao Yichen complained that he wanted to be the microphone, but Yu Yu rejected him. "Idiot! It's an engagement party, not a wedding. There's no need for a flower girl. Mommy is not wearing a wedding gown." When Xiao Yichen heard this, he started chattering again. I thought it was a wedding. When is Mommy and Daddy's wedding? Yun Shishir smiled. I haven't decided on a date yet. Why, Xiao Yichen, are you that impatient? Xiao Yichen said matter-of-factly. Of course. All I want is to see the day Mommy marries Daddy. Why? Because on that day, Mommy will definitely be very happy. I want Mommy to be happy. Xiao Yichen's words made Yun Shishir's heart feel sweet again. Yu said coldly from the side. This bewitching potion is really good. Humph. Even if Mommy gets married, Mommy will still love me the most. You're not allowed to steal my Mommy. Xiao Yichen pouted and said, What do you mean I can't snatch your Mommy away from you? Mommy is also mine. It's also mine. The two little guys did not agree and started to pinch each other again. Each of them hugged one of Yun Shishir's arms and acted coquettishly. Yun Shishir did not know what to do, but she did not know whether to laugh or cry. With two children at home, she really could not have a moment of peace. The next day, Mu Yaja's private jet arrived as scheduled. Yun Shishir and the two little guys boarded the same jet. The other jet was specially used to pick up the guests from both parties. There was something that had to be mentioned. Chapter 1763. His consideration was that the guests invited by the man were all wealthy and respectable. He was afraid that the mother-daughter trio would say something inappropriate regardless of the occasion, which would embarrass everyone in public and embarrass them. He did not want to ruin Yun Shishir's important moment at such an important occasion. However, he still invited them. If he did not invite them, it would not be right. If word got out, people would gossip. In the end, it was Mu Yaja who spoke. It was not a problem to invite them. At most, they would be separated from some important guests in two cabins. During the engagement party, they would be arranged as far away as possible. Mu Yaja also knew that Xiang Yu and her daughter were not good people. They did not know how to control their words. But if he did not invite them, it would not be right. Hence he made such arrangements. Yun Shishir invited a few friends. Among them, those who were on good terms with her colleagues were invited. Xiao Shui, who was her best friend and future bridesmaid, was also invited. As for Jiang Li, she was the only one who was invited among all her classmates. The rest of them were all close friends of his. When it was time to board the plane, Xiao Shui was used to such situations, so she remained calm. Jiang Li, on the other hand, was completely shocked. When she was traveling, she had also taken a plane, but she had never been on such a luxurious plane. The solid wood seats, the luxurious decor, and the luxurious furnishings in the cabin all showed the style of a noble. She even dared not sit down. More importantly, the guests invited by the groom were all dignified. Some of them had even been seen on important international news. They seemed to be very influential. There were bodyguards wearing sunglasses 3 meters away from them. They did not allow outsiders to get close. What was even more surprising was that a few politicians from a certain country were also invited. A few international politicians and members of a certain country's royal family, as well as the Prime Minister and President of Country X, were allocated to the VIP cabin. The important politicians and celebrities sat in a suite. Yun Shishir's guests sat in the same cabin as some business celebrities. Even so, Jiang Li still felt quite pressured. Most of the guests who were sitting in the same cabin were people with great backgrounds, and their names could be called out. Even if he hadn't appeared on TV, there were special introductions in some financial newspapers. One of them seemed to be the CEO of a large corporation. All the famous people on the Forbes list were among them. Sitting among them, she could not help but feel the aura of these big shots in the business world. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on her. It was so oppressive that she could not breathe. Even if she was just casually drinking some tea, she had to pretend to be a lady in order to feel that she could adapt to such a scene. But at the same time, he felt that she was imitating others and making a fool of herself. It was neither fish nor fowl. In short, no matter what she did, she felt out of place with the nobles of this class. The huge difference between them made her unable to adapt quickly. When a person was in a high position, their temperament would be completely different from ordinary people. Moreover, these big shots at the pinnacle all had extraordinary backgrounds and were especially noble. Jiang Li resisted the urge to scream and sat in the same place, trembling with fear. She held Xiao Shui's hand tightly. She had not seen Xiao Shui for a long time. The reason she was invited this time was because they were classmates. After all, they had been classmates for 4 years. Jiangli had been good to Yun Shishir, and Yun Shishir was grateful to her. Therefore, she made an exception and invited her from among her classmates. Chapter 1764. Due to that class reunion, everyone had parted on bad terms. She thought that her relationship with Yun Shishir would end just like that. When Jiangli received her invitation, she was more touched than surprised. She then seriously prepared a 4-digit red packet. This was already considered a decent amount among the commoners. However, compared to Mu Yaja's guests, it was not even worth a mention. To put it bluntly, a private jet flight to a private island for a vacation was not even worth this bit of money. She could not help feeling guilty at first, but when Xiao Shui found out about it, she said, "It's fine as long as you have the intention. Will Shishir care about this bit of money?" Only then did she feel more at ease. Of course, she still knew her limits and knew to save some face for Yun Shishir. Even though she was shocked, she still pretended to be calm in the face of such an occasion. Yun Yeching and Yun Yeho were dressed especially well for the engagement ceremony. They had prepared 2 suits, but when they boarded the plane and saw the various celebrities in the cabin, they could not help but feel a little oppressed. This feeling was indescribable. It could only be said that their status was still in a different world from Mu Yaja's social circle. Because of this, he could not help but feel worried for Yun Shishir. Since ancient times, marriage was about matching the social status of the 2 families. Of course, it did not mean that the 2 families had to be of the same status, but at the very least, it could not be so different. One was a commoner while the other was from the upper class. The difference between them could not be summed up in a few words. He was afraid that Yun Shishir would inevitably suffer after marrying into the Mu family. Most of the rich and powerful would not fancy Yun Shishir's family background. This was what he was most worried about. In the end, due to his nervousness, Yun Yeching had no choice but to bring his younger brother to the same cabin as Xiang Yu and her daughter. The moment Xiang Yu saw Yun Yeching, she hurriedly pulled him to the side and said, "Brother Chang, you're here. You're being a little unkind in this matter. How could your daughter be so capable to hook you up with such a rich husband? You've been hiding it from us all this time." Yun Yeching was stunned. Xiang Yu couldn't help but ask, "What is the background of Shishir's fiancé? From the looks of it, they've even sent out a private jet. You must have a lot of money, right?" Yun Yeching knitted his brows in disgust at her question. "I don't care about Shishir's fiancé's family background. I only care about whether he loves Shishir, whether he dotes on Shishir, and whether he treats Shishir well. I don't care about anything else." "How can this be?" But Xiang Yu didn't agree. "He is your son-in-law. You don't even know him well. Why do you care about him?" Then she guessed mysteriously, "I think his background is not simple. How could he afford such a luxurious private jet if he wasn't a billionaire? Brother Cheng, if you ask me, Shishir is really not bad at all. With her finding such a rich husband for you, you won't have to worry about your wealth in the future." Chapter 1765. Yun Yeching gave her a lukewarm smile and glanced at her expressionlessly. "I don't care about these things. Shishir being able to find a man who loves her and their children being able to spend the rest of their lives together is the most important thing. Everything else, be it rich or poor, is secondary." "Sigh. Look at you. You have the life of luxury, so why are you so unappreciative?" She was exasperated at his failure to live up to her expectations. Yun Qingmiao, who was curious, also came forward and inquired, "Uncle, Shishir is really lucky. She can find such a handsome and rich husband." One can't be too worldly when looking at things and people. When 2 people are together, the most important thing is their feelings. Other material conditions are not important at all. Yun Yeching did not take this matter seriously. He had never thought of the glory and wealth he could enjoy in the future if Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja were together. To put it bluntly, if Yun Shishir led a good life, he was willing to work harder for the rest of his life. That was what he really thought, and that was what he did. After returning to the capital, he immediately found a job to take care of Yun Yeho while working. While he still had some stamina, he could work a job and earn some money to reduce her burden. Alas, neither Xiang Yu nor Yun Qingmiao thought the same. To them, his words sounded a little pompous. Yun Qingmiao smiled and said, "Uncle, what are you saying? If her fiancé isn't rich, will Shishir still fancy him? Isn't she with him so that she can have a better life in the future? If she marries such a rich man, She can live a comfortable and carefree life as a rich madam for the rest of her life. She doesn't have to work or earn money as she has a husband to support her. As long as she works hard to give birth to his children, her life in the future will be very comfortable. Xiangyu also sighed at the side. That's right. Shurshu's good fortune was not something that could be obtained through envy. If possible, let Qingmiao and Qinli visit Shurshu and learn from her. In the future, they can also find me 2 rich husbands. That would be great. At this point, Yun Yeqing did not want to talk to them anymore. Some things can't be asked for. After a pause, he reminded them again, Xiangyu, Qingmiao, Qinli, there are a lot of influential people at this engagement ceremony. When the time comes, remember not to speak carelessly. Be careful with your words and actions, and at least know your limits when you speak. Hearing this, Xiangyu's expression changed, and displeasure appeared in her eyes. Ah! Brother Cheng, what are you talking about? Shurshu just got engaged, and you're already setting up the rules. What, are you afraid that the 3 of us will embarrass Shurshu? Don't you think it's inappropriate to say that? Yun Yeqing thought in dissatisfaction. It's precisely because the 3 of them are unreliable in their words and actions. Otherwise, why would I give them such advice? Xiangyu only took it that he was being arrogant in front of them. His daughter had married into a rich family, yet he was starting to despise them for being poor and lacking in class. It was just marrying into a rich family. Did he have to be so lofty in his words? His pretense was quite impressive. Wasn't he just afraid that they would embarrass themselves in public? Did he have to speak like this? Chapter 1766. Sigh. I'm just worried. To be honest, most of the guests invited by the groom this time are people of status. I don't dare to speak carelessly for fear of being laughed at. So just keep your mouth shut when the time comes. Unwillingly, Xiangyu agreed. However, she had another thought in mind. Once Yun Yeqing was gone, she immediately whispered to Yun Qingmiao, "Did you hear that? All the guests this time are people of status. Aren't you going to let me seize this opportunity?" Although Yun Qingmiao pretended to be calm on the surface, she could not hide the excitement in her heart. She held her mother's hand tightly, clearly at a loss for what to do. "Mom, in that case, are all the people who came to the wedding banquet this time influential people?" Her mother snorted. "What do you think? Most of them are either rich or powerful. Didn't you hear what your uncle said earlier? He said that many of the guests at this engagement party are people of status and influence. Hee. Shurshu's fiancé is so influential that he even owns several private jets. How can the guests he invited be third-rate people?" Yun Qingmiao was elated to hear that, but she was full of expectations for the upcoming engagement party. She longed to meet a person of status and power like Mu Yaja. He was tall, handsome, and powerful. Most importantly, he seemed to have inexhaustible wealth. Perhaps it was because he was used to living a hard life. He had never enjoyed a good life since he was young. When he was young, he went to work in the factory. In the electronics factory, day after day, year after year, he worked 12 hours a day and only had 2 days of rest a month. Yet, he could only earn a salary of a little more than 3,000 yuan. At first, she was quite satisfied with this salary. 3,000 yuan was considered a good income in the countryside. However, there was no harm in comparison. When she followed her mother into this bustling metropolis, she saw real estate with an average price of tens of thousands, luxury cars that easily cost hundreds of thousands, mobile phones that cost a few thousand, luxury goods that cost tens of thousands, bags, lipsticks, cosmetics. To her, almost everything was full of impactful temptation. She suddenly felt that a monthly salary of 3,000 yuan was nothing. Living in such a huge international city, even if it was only a few tens of thousands of yuan, it might be difficult to make ends meet in a month. But if she could marry a rich husband, that would be a different story. She could also afford to drive a luxury car, live in a villa, buy Hermes bags that cost hundreds of thousands, and buy high-end cosmetics. She could walk through the bustling department stores and buy whatever she liked without hesitation. She yearned for such a carefree life. Therefore, she was extremely envious of Yun Shurshu. However, it was important to know one's own limitations. Yun Qingmiao was well aware that her looks could not compare to Yun Shurshu's. Perhaps, it was hard to meet a man as noble as Mu Yaja, but she did not have to be too handsome or tall. As long as he had money, power, and could satisfy her material needs, That was enough. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Yun Shirshir. If she had not been invited to her engagement party, she might not have had such an occasion and opportunity to try her luck. Chapter 1767. After she arrived in the capital, she caught up with the latest trends. She used communication devices and even learned how to use Weibo. She followed Gu Xingzi's account on Weibo and saw a lot of intimate interactions between him and Yun Shirshir. She was very excited. It seemed that the two of them had a good relationship. While she was jealous, she was also looking forward to seeing if Gu Xingzi would attend the engagement party. If he did, she wanted to sit next to him. Even if she could only look at him from a close distance, she would be very satisfied. Of course, these were just wishful thinking. If he did not show up, then she would only be disappointed. However, Yun Qinli was destined to be disappointed this time. Yun Shirshir did not invite Gu Xingzi. Actually, she had wanted to invite Gu Xingzi, but she gave up the idea after considering Mu Yaja's feelings. If he didn't like someone, she would consider his feelings and keep a little distance. Yun Shirshir's plane arrived at the island first. After the plane landed on the tarmac, bodyguards escorted her all the way to the castle. However, the interesting thing was that after she got into the car, the bodyguard covered her eyes. While she was feeling uneasy and suspicious, the bodyguard said that it was the boss's idea. The boss was probably referring to Mu Yaja. What was this guy trying to do by pretending to be mysterious? Yun Shirshir was puzzled, but she did not say anything and allowed them to cover her eyes. When she got out of the car, she was carefully led into the castle. Just as she entered the castle, the crisp sound of high heels hitting the marble floor reminded her of where she was. "Can I take it off now?" she asked softly. She could not see anything in front of her and this made her feel very uneasy. The cold and respectful voice beside her said, "Sorry, please wait for a moment. Follow me upstairs." Suddenly, he reminded her, "Be careful of the stairs." With the help of the bodyguards, she was led all the way to the 4th floor. In a daze, she did not know how many flights of stairs she had taken. Finally, she stopped in front of a door. After the bodyguard sent her into the room, he quietly retreated, closed the door, and left. Yun Shirshir waved her hands in the air for a long time before she took off the blindfold in a daze. However, when she opened her eyes, she was instantly mesmerized by the luxurious and elegant decor in front of her. Inside the huge room, the ceiling was more than 5 meters high. As far as the eye could see, the richly ornamented beams and painted rafters were luxurious and elegant. The unique retro and luxurious style of European medieval royalty was fully reflected. There were bright floor-to-ceiling windows and an arched door decorated with holy flowers. Past the arched door was the bedroom. There was a princess bed that was 2 meters wide and 3 meters long. The pink curtains were gently swaying, half closed. Above her head, there was a complicated and beautiful crystal chandelier, elegant and beautiful paintings, an exquisite dressing table, and a high-quality solid wood wardrobe, all of which were luxurious. Everything in front of him was something that could only be seen in movies. But now, it was happening right before his eyes. She still remembered a fairy tale movie she had watched when she was young. The female lead was a royal princess who lived carefree in a dreamy castle manor. Every day, she would wake up in a luxurious princess room like the one in front of her. This was the princess room of her dreams. This was the real princess room. Chapter 1768. Yun Shirshir was pleasantly surprised as she walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Through the clear window, she could see the vast blue ocean, the spotlessly white beach and the seagulls circling around in the air. The tender green lawn had already been decorated. From this position, she could see the back garden of the castle. The fresh flowers were in full bloom and it was a beautiful sight to behold. This wasn't the first time she had come to this castle, but the scenery that she saw the previous time was completely different from this time. It looked like a certain man had put in a lot of effort to redecorate the castle according to her dreams. It was too beautiful. It was really too beautiful. If she could, she really wanted to live here for the rest of her life. How blissful would that be? She loved the boundless blue ocean and spotlessly white beach the most. This was the fairy tale wonderland of her dreams. Yun Shirshir clutched her chest as her heart was beating like thunder. Everything in front of her gave her a huge surprise. A pair of arms suddenly hugged her from behind. Following that, she was pulled into an embrace from behind by a strong arm. The man's unique magnetic voice was close to her ear as it sounded, "Do you like it?" Yun Shirshir raised her head abruptly and met with Mu Yaja's deep and charming eyes. She smiled, but it looked like she was crying yet not laughing. I like it. I like it so much. Yun Shirshir turned her head back to look out of the window, but she still couldn't regain her senses. Did you prepare these for me? She found it hard to believe and felt as if she was in a dream. Mu Yaja, however, rubbed her nose affectionately. Who else could it be? You. Yun Shirshir was touched by his meticulousness once again. This man. How could he be so meticulous? Also, was he a roundworm in her stomach? Why was it that he always seemed to be able to guess what she was thinking? How did he do it? It's good that you like it. Mu Yaja saw the corners of her lips curled upwards and he couldn't help but reveal a gratified smile. Earlier on, he was even a little nervous. He, who had always been the one to decide life and death in the midst of bloody storms, was actually a little nervous at this moment. He was secretly angry at himself, but at the same time, he was careful, afraid that she would not like it at all. Now, seeing the yearning in her eyes that she didn't hide at all, his heart finally calmed down. Yun Shirshir was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Mu Yaja said, "Come in." The door was opened from the outside and several elegantly dressed designers walked in with a set of gowns. Chairman Mu, the gown is here. Would you like Miss Yun to try it on? That person asked. Mu Yaja looked at her. Give it a try? Yes. Miss Yun, please try it on. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, we'll immediately send someone to rectify it overnight. Yun Shirshir nodded and cooperated. Okay. Several designers sent Yun Shirshir into the cloakroom, drew the curtains, and tried on the clothes for her. Mu Yaja was waiting on the sofa outside. After changing into the gown, it took a long time for styling. A beautiful gown naturally had to be matched with beautiful makeup to look even more outstanding. However, he also waited patiently. Although the time spent waiting was long, it was also comfortable. He even had a bit of anticipation in his heart. Chapter 1769. At this moment, it was already dusk. Beautiful rays of sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows and fell on her body. Her long gown seemed to be plated with a faint layer of gold, emitting a holy light, exquisite and beautiful. This gown was a combination of Chinese and Western fashion elements. The skirt was a floor-to-ceiling long dress with a long hemline. The collar and sleeves were the most beautiful elements of Han Chinese clothing, especially the Su embroidery. It was classical and elegant, adding a thick stroke of color to this gown. The gown used a gradual change of color. From the collar to the hemline, it went from light to dark. At first glance, it was like a fairy condensed from roses, magnificent and noble. The neckline was designed with an off-shoulder design and exquisite Suzhou embroidery. Every stitch was flawless, especially the embroidery on the neckline. Even if one were to zoom in and look at it carefully, one would still be amazed by how exquisite it was. This was simply a masterpiece. It was designed by a famous designer and handmade. It was definitely not empty talk. Not to mention Yun Shirshir's devilish figure, which was perfectly reflected in this gown. The unique design on the chest, at first glance, was like a design made of peonies. It set off the two sections of her exquisite collarbones that were like jade. Those round and fair shoulders also showed off her ample bosom, but it was not overly revealing. It looked elegant and charming, noble and proper. At first glance, it looked like a proud peony. Her thick hair was meticulously coiled up. Even if there were no decorations, it was draped over her shoulders. There was no need for too much adornment, but it still gave off an unruly beauty. Her previous image was like the pure and beautiful style in The Green Apple, and the antique beauty in Lethal Beauty. She had never been as domineering as she was today. It turned out that her beauty could also be so flamboyant. Mu Yaja's gaze suddenly fell on her face. Her small face had been carefully sculpted by the stylist and was delicately painted with makeup. Yun Shirshir was originally a natural beauty. Even without any makeup, she had a face that people could not bear to look away from. At this moment, after the makeup, her beauty had a unique dark color. The gown was designed in Han Chinese. The makeup was also designed to match the design of the gown, using the crystal peach blossom makeup. The stylist did not go with the trend. Instead, he used a combination of Chinese and Korean makeup. Her curved willow-like eyebrows were slightly smooth, and light brown eyebrow powder that outlined her eyebrows, thick and curly long. Even if she said that she envied Muyaja's eyelashes, her eyelashes, thick and curly and long. Even if she said that she envied Muyaja eyelashes, her eyelashes, thick and long eyelashes, was thick and curly long. Her eyelashes were thick and long. Chapter 1770. What did it mean to capture a person's soul? It probably meant that with just one look, one's heart would be tightly grasped and not let go. It was as though one was possessed by a demon. Like a demon, like a charm, her eyes were like silk. Her fair and translucent makeup looked like it could be broken with a flick of a finger. Her skin was naturally good, and her soft red lips were embellished with a little lipstick. The bright red lipstick didn't appear gaudy, but instead gave a direct visual impact. Her black hair, black eyes, and red lips were moist and moist. When the corners of her lips curved slightly, it was like a blooming flower. He couldn't wait to kiss it and smell that sweet fragrance. Muyaja's throat tightened slightly. He held his breath deeply and held it. His gaze fell on her body, but he couldn't bear to look away. It was as though he had tasted a mouthful of wine that had been sealed for 100 years. Just one mouthful and his heart felt slightly tipsy. Even his body felt a little hot. But he knew in his heart that this reaction wasn't because he had drunk the wine. The man suddenly stood up and walked in front of her. When Yun Shirshir saw him approaching, his gaze landed on her body without blinking. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She was even more nervous than the last time she acted in front of the camera. When she was done with her makeup, she also took a look at herself in the mirror. But when she saw herself in the mirror, other than being stunned, she also felt a little uncomfortable. She had never thought that she would have such a beautiful moment. In the past, she had neglected to dress herself up. Even if she put on makeup, it would be light makeup and a little powder. However, today's makeup was done meticulously. After a full hour, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw how she had changed from a pure and elegant face to such a beautiful and alluring face. Women weren't born works of art. The sculpting in the later stages was especially important. When she saw the man approaching her, her throat felt a little dry. She asked nervously, "How is it? Is it okay?" Muyaja walked in front of her and lowered his head to look at her face. Her hair was all tied up. At this point, her palm-sized little face was completely revealed. However, a few strands of hair naughtily fell by her ear. He suddenly reached out and tucked those strands of hair behind her ear. Because of his careless touch, she shyly lowered her head. Her elf-like ears were actually slightly hot and red. It was obvious that she was shy. This little idiot was always so easily embarrassed. Furthermore, due to the nature of her skin, even the slightest bit of shyness would quickly show itself. Noticing that she was lowering her head, he reached out his finger and lifted her chin with some dissatisfaction. "Raise your head and let me see." Yun Shirshir raised her face shyly, but the corners of her eyes drooped slightly. Her eyelashes, which were like black phoenix feathers, flickered and trembled from time to time. It was obvious that she was too nervous. Oh God! How could she be so nervous? What a disappointment! Yun Shirshir was secretly embarrassed and annoyed. She couldn't help but clench her fists a little tighter. However, she heard his mellow voice say warmly above her head, "Very beautiful." The sudden voice made the air in her brain thin for a few seconds. Her face heated up even more. Really? She looked at him and saw that the amazement in his eyes was undisguised. His heart was moved. It was more than just his heart being moved. Chapter 1771. His body was slightly warm. He really liked how she was dressed up. He opened his mouth again and said with a smile, "You look very beautiful like this." He used an exclamation. Even if it was just a short sentence, it was undoubtedly the highest praise he could give her. When the designers standing behind him heard this, they were also deeply encouraged. To them, when their designs were worn by a beautiful woman, it was the greatest affirmation. To be able to receive Muyaja's approval made them even more elated. To the designers, to be able to receive the approval of this distinguished guest in front of them was the highest praise. However, at this time, they were still sensible and knew how to observe the situation. The two of them looked at each other, understood tacitly, and quietly left. The door was tightly shut. In the huge bedroom, only the two of them were left. Muyaja reached out and hugged her waist. The tailoring of the exquisite design behind her back was extraordinarily good. This gown was especially comfortable on her body. It wasn't tight or loose. Every inch of curve seemed to be completely natural. He hugged her and pulled her into his embrace. From the angle where he lowered his head, he could see her pair of eyelashes fluttering like butterfly wings. They were thick and long, gentle and lovely, and set off her moving temperament. He couldn't help but nod his head and lightly kiss her fluttering eyelashes. Soft kisses fell between her eyebrows, the corners of her eyes, the tip of her nose, the edge of her lips, and finally to her elegant and beautiful neck. The kiss was deep, but his eyes were burning hot. This was his fiancée. The woman who would hold his hand for the rest of his life. His only wife. She was so beautiful that it was as if she didn't eat the food of mortals. She was like a fairy that no one could profane. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but laugh a little. She pushed him, but he didn't know that he was satisfied and couldn't bear to leave her. His hand cupped the back of her head and he kissed her lips. He didn't forcefully seize it, nor did he attack the city. Instead, he carefully and gently decorated it over and over again. He wanted to taste it. It was like kissing a piece of art, a rare treasure. He loved it, but he couldn't bear to use too much strength. Yun Shirshir pushed him away and looked up. However, when she saw the lipstick on his thin lips, she laughed again. "Your lips are stained with lipstick." Mu Yaja's handsome brows furrowed and he couldn't help but purse his lips. This time, it was even more obvious. Thus, he subconsciously reached out to wipe it off, but she stopped him. "Don't move. I'll clean it for you." She carefully reached out her fingers and used her fingertips to gently wipe the lipstick off his thin lips, little by little. Mu Yaja remained motionless as he allowed her to wipe him. He thought to himself that this was probably the happiest moment of his life. She had once fantasized that if it was their wedding, he would be like the other grooms-to-be, nervous, uneasy, excited, and excited. However, right now, there was probably no nervousness or uneasiness. It was just that his excitement and excitement were reflected in reality. Strictly speaking, this was not his first engagement. In the past, under Mu Shang's repeated requests, he had to comply with the imperial decree and hold a forced engagement with Mu Wanru. Chapter 1772. At that time in his heart, the engagement ceremony was not that sacred, and there were not many expectations. It was just a dispensable ceremony. As long as the person was there, it was fine. The engagement ceremony was held in the hotel, and everything was carried out according to the normal procedures. Just before the engagement ceremony, he rushed over from the company's morning meeting. Looking at Mu Wanru's face, he was not touched. Instead, he felt a deep sense of disgust from the bottom of his heart. At that time, the engagement ceremony did not leave a deep impression on him. Among the blessings that were either feigned civility or had ulterior motives, he went through the entire process as if he was putting on a show. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would put so much effort into an engagement ceremony. Yun Shirshir did not know how much effort he had put into this engagement ceremony. Everything was done by himself. Even this huge bedroom was redecorated according to his ideas by the designers. But now, when he saw his fiancée standing in front of him with a sweet smile, his heart was greatly touched. Mu Yaja curled his lips slightly, but he could not help but smile. He caressed her cheek as if he had not had enough. Yun Shirshir slapped his hand away coquettishly. "Don't touch. You're going to ruin my makeup." But he said, "You'll look good even if you ruin it." Yun Shirshir was stunned. She did not expect that he would take the initiative to say such sweet words of love. She laughed and teased him. "I didn't expect that sometimes your mouth can be so sweet." Mu Yaja glanced at her and caught the secret smile in her eyes. He reached out and easily caught her hand. Nodding his head again, he covered her mouth with his and whispered, "I never lie. You're good-looking, and you're good-looking." "Hey, are you trying to bewitch me?" Yun Shirshir said coquettishly. "Stop it. Don't try to confuse me with sweet words." "Really?" Mu Yaja emphasized again and again. "My wife, the world's most beautiful woman. The world's most beautiful woman." These 5 words were about to send her to the clouds of happiness. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and couldn't stop laughing. As she laughed, she gently poked his chest with her finger. "My husband is also the world's most obedient." Sometimes, the words he said made people's hearts feel as sweet as honey. In her heart, his image had always been unsmiling. He was always cold and resolute, but she didn't expect him to have such a gentle side. Obedient? Mu Yaja repeated this word in his heart and furrowed his brows. Yes. Mu Yaja laughed deeply. This was the first time someone had used the word obedient to describe him. Listening to his laughter, Yun Shirshir could not help but indulge in it, and her heart collapsed. His voice was extremely low, and when he laughed, it was extremely magnetic. It possessed an extraordinary bewitching power, and people couldn't help but be captivated. She didn't have any ability to resist his laughter. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and pinched her nose. Obedient? Are you sure you want to use this word to describe me? Can't I? Either way, it's all up to you. Yun Shirshir suddenly couldn't help but hug him. Her hands folded behind his waist, and her face gently rested on his chest. There was a kind of dreamlike happiness. Chapter 1773. Mu Yaja gently caressed her silky hair, only to hear her say worriedly, "If you continue to spoil me like this, won't you spoil me?" Would he spoil her until she became even more arrogant, willful, and unruly? However, Mu Yaja said matter-of-factly, "I should spoil you until you're unruly, like a little princess, willful and arrogant. I'll spoil you more than anyone else." She couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Why? He looked down at her and smiled gently. Because this way, you won't be able to leave me. He would spoil her a little more. She would rely on him a little more. He liked her dependence. Even if they were together, he would never tire of it. If Lu Jinyu were present at this moment and saw this scene, he would definitely sigh like an old man. This is the sour smell of love. What a torment for single people. At the same time, he would also silently complain that Boss was such a cold-hearted man. Who would have thought that he couldn't escape the fate of being a slave to his wife even when he was deeply in love? Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Slave to his wife. His wife came first. She was also happy. Mu Yaja glanced out of the corner of his eye, and saw a pair of red high heels quietly placed on the low table. He suddenly picked her up and carried her to the sofa. Then, he knelt on one knee in front of her and picked up one of her high heels with one hand. His other hand, under her skirt, easily grabbed one of her fair and tender feet. His touch made her involuntarily shrink back shyly. However, he didn't allow her to retreat and held her foot firmly in his hand. Her feet were really not big. They were only about size 35 to 36. She was not short, but her small feet were not even as big as his palm. She was so small, and her hands were so small. Even this pair of jade feet could be held in one hand. "You!" she suddenly spoke up, trying to stop him. He raised his eyes to look at her. His handsome eyes were deep and his gaze was burning. She immediately blushed and nervously grabbed the corner of her skirt, crumpling it. Looking at this posture, was he going to personally try on the high heels she would wear at the engagement party? However, seeing him kneeling on one knee and lowering himself, she couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. He had always been high and mighty, like an emperor. Now that he was kneeling on one knee in front of her, she felt a little shy. At the thought of this, she immediately blushed and said, I can do it myself." "No need, you sit down." As he said this, he held her foot and gently put the beautiful red high heels on her foot. It was neither too big nor too small, just right. The red high-heeled shoes did not have any repetitive design. The shiny slanted shoes set off a luxurious and elegant feeling. He then put it on the other high heels for her. As if he's. In contrast to hers, his was as if serving her shoes was a matter of course, and there was nothing to be surprised about. After putting it on, he helped her stand up. The skirt fell to the ground, covering a pair of jade feet. She walked back and forth, and the high heels fit her perfectly. Chapter 1774. Just as he was about to walk toward her, there was a knock on the door. Yun Shirshir looked over curiously, thinking that it was the designer outside. In the end, the door was opened from the outside before she could let him in. Xiang Yu's chattering voice reached their ears. "Shirshir? Are you there? I heard from them that you're in this room." Hearing this, Yun Shirshir's brows furrowed tightly. She knew who had come. Xiang Yu, Yun Qingmiao, and Yun Shirshir arrived at the castle in a car right after they got off the plane. After the butler settled the three of them down, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli went into a frenzy. They were still guessing where Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja's wedding would be held. They thought that Yun Shirshir's wedding would be held in a romantic place like Bali, Sanya, or the Sea of Love. After they got off the plane, they thought that the hotel was arranged for them. However, when they heard that the destination was a private island, they did not get it until they got off the plane and were sent to the castle. The sisters were utterly shocked. A castle. A castle built on a private island. They stood at the castle's entrance and looked up at the majestic, palace-like retro castle. From afar, it was noble and gorgeous, filled with the classical style of medieval European royalty. At first, they were still in disbelief and convulsion. It was only when the butler welcomed them in that they dared to believe what was happening before their eyes. Oh God! How rich is Yun Shirshir's fiancé? To be able to own his own castle on a private island, he must be worth at least hundreds of millions of yuan. They heard that there were exclusive helicopters and luxury yachts on the island. How could they not be shocked when these luxuries, which they had only seen on the news, appeared before their eyes in real life? Does all of this belong to Mu Yaja? In that case, all of this will belong to Yun Shirshir in the future too. Oh God! Oh God! For a moment, too many exclamations came to their minds. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli toured the castle excitedly as if they were looking at a work of art. They could not hide the surprise on their faces. There was no need to mention how envious the sisters were of Yun Shirshir. Which girl didn't dream of having a castle of their own? However, all of this could only be imagined. Who would have thought that Yun Shirshir would have everything so real? Yun Qingmiao in particular was so jealous that her eyes were red. She wanted it too. She wanted a private jet, a private castle, a yacht, and a beach. She wanted everything she could see. Vanity was like a germ, quickly spreading and occupying one's heart. When they opened the door and saw Yun Shirshir in a luxurious and elegant gown, the three of them were stunned. Then, they surrounded her with envy. When they passed through the arched door, Xiang Yu saw Mu Yaja. She was startled for a moment, then her lips curled into a warm smile. Little Mu, you're here too. Because of the angle just now, he didn't see him immediately. Upon seeing Mu Yaja, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances and smiled sweetly. Brother Mu. Brother-in-law to be. Mu Yaja only gave a low hum of acknowledgement, but the smile on his face quickly faded and became a little colder. Chapter 1775. Yes. We just arrived. We heard that you're here, so we rushed over to see you. Xiang Yu's smile was incomparably affectionate, and there was a fawning look in her eyes as if she was trying to get close to her. Yun Shirshir, however, asked awkwardly, "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" This question stumped Xiang Yu. Yun Qingmiao grinned and said, "The door isn't locked, so we pushed it open and came in. Did we disturb you?" The door was not locked, so they pushed it open and came in. Wasn't this reason a little too pompous? This room was her personal space, after all. How could they enter without knocking or asking for permission? Knocking on the door was out of courtesy, and they could only enter after asking if it was convenient. Yun Shirshir smiled and asked, "Since you just arrived, did the butler arrange a room for you?" "Yes. It's just that the room is a little small," answered Xiang Yu. "Small?" Yun Shirshir glanced at Mu Yaja with a puzzled look. Yun Qinli, who was beside her, said, "Oh, it's not small. It's just that it's a little cramped for 3 people." Mu Yaja said, "The butler may have been negligent. I'll arrange another room for you right away." Xiang Yu, however, said politely, "Hey, it's fine. Don't be so busy. Let Auntie take a look at you." As she spoke, she walked toward Yun Shirshir, held her shoulders and sized her up. "Oh my! This dress is so pretty. The material is so good. You must have spent a lot on it, right?" Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli came over as well, looking at her dress with envy and yearning in their eyes. "Sister Shirshir, is this the dress you wore for your engagement? It's so beautiful. The red dress is so festive. More importantly, this dress looks especially elegant on Shirshir. Shirshir, you're so beautiful, just like a princess." Yun Qingmiao continued to bewitch her too, so much so that Yun Shirshir could not get used to their competing praises for a while. What's going on? Why was he suddenly so enthusiastic towards her? Yun Shirshir was confused for a moment and looked at them in a daze. Seeing her in a daze, Xiang Yu covered her mouth and laughed. "Look, Shirshir is shy." Yun Qingmiao immediately retorted, Sure, you're a bride-to-be. How can you be shy? But look, Qinli, Sure and Brother Mu look so good together. Yun Qinli smiled and said, What Brother Mu? Sister, you should change the way you address him. You should call him future brother-in-law. Yun Sure was a little overwhelmed. What was going on? 2 days ago, they were still saying a few words of jealousy to her from time to time. Why did their attitude change completely today? Yun Qingmiao, who was secretly sizing up Mu Yaja, could not help blushing. The man in front of her was dressed in a well-tailored suit. His black hair was styled with mousse, which made him look even more dashing and handsome. His deep-set eyes were as mesmerizing as the stars, dark and endless. However, when he swept a glance over, his arrogant and cold gaze made her heart skip a beat. No woman would be able to resist his charm if they stood before him. Chapter 1776. He could not help but frown. With just a glance, he knew what she was shy about. Yun Sure also noticed her sister's gaze on Mu Yaja. Her brows knitted together in slight displeasure. Xiang Yu was still enthusiastically talking about something, but at the same time, her tone was secretly trying to find out more information. Sure? I still don't know what Xiao Mu's job is. As she spoke, she suddenly pulled her to the side by the arm and asked enviously, Is Xiao Mu's family especially rich? I was shocked when I saw that he had a private jet and a castle yacht. At first, I thought that he was just an ordinary white-collar worker, but now, it seems that he's not that simple. Yun Qingmiao pretended to ask casually, Sure, what's the background of our future brother-in-law? You haven't told us about him. Is it because you don't treat us as your family? Xiang Yu quickly chimed in. That's right. Tell us, and we'll give you a reference to check him out. Yun Sure frowned and glanced at Mu Yaja, only to see him standing there and patiently talking to Yun Qinli. Yun Qinli was like a happy little bird as she circled around Mu Yaja, looking at him with adoration and asking questions from time to time. Yun Sure retracted her gaze and replied slowly, Him? He's an employee of the Mu group. This was what Mu Yaja had said to her classmates during their class reunions. A CEO was also a type of employee, so she was just being more reserved in her words. Mu group? Employee? Xiang Yu was surprised to hear that. She had never heard of the Mu group. She had never come into contact with the business world, so she did not know what kind of status the Mu group had in the business world. An employee, though. It did not look like one, right? How could an ordinary employee afford a private jet and such a huge island of the dead? Sure, are you hiding it from me, or are you also kept in the dark? He doesn't look like a company employee at all. I think he must be a rich second-generation heir with a net worth of billions. Otherwise, how could an engagement ceremony be so extravagant? As soon as Xiang Yu finished speaking, Mu Yaja seemed to have heard her voice and walked towards them. He walked forward and put his arm around Yun Shure's shoulders in a very natural manner. He smiled politely and said, This is not a big deal. Shure and I only have one engagement ceremony in our lives. Naturally, we have to make it grand. When Xiang Yu saw Mu Yaja walking over, she was startled. She was afraid that he had heard her words. However, when she saw that he was polite and didn't seem to be angry, she felt relieved. Xiao Mu, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Since you are Shure's fiancée, as Shure's aunt, and Shure is my only niece, I have to check on her. Our Shure is gentle and virtuous. Since you've decided to marry her, then you should take a look. Since she's already your fiancée, then it's my responsibility as an aunt to inquire about your family situation. These words were said in an extremely dignified manner. Xiang Yu just wanted to see what kind of family Mu Yaja was from. She was just being vain. Chapter 1777. Check. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and quickly understood her intentions. Yun Shure was a little angry when she heard Xiang Yu's words. What did she mean by being her aunt and checking for her? What right did she have to check for her? What did it have to do with her, who she was marrying, the status of the person she was marrying, and his family background? Could it be that when she got married, she had to know everything about the person she was going to marry? Regardless of whether he was rich or poor, she had her eyes on this man and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. If she said that, it would make others misunderstand that she chose to be with Mu Yaja because of his family background. Yun Shure was so angry that her face flushed red. Her face, which was originally covered in rouge, was now even redder. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her and knew that she was a little unhappy. Hence, he said, Shirshir is my fiancée and the wife that I have decided to be with for the rest of my life. There is no doubt about my feelings for her. Of course, the so-called sincerity is not something that can be proven with empty words. I will only say that regardless of whether I am rich or poor, even if I have to give up everything, I will not let her suffer. Moreover, the so-called power, wealth, and status are never eternal. But my sincerity towards her will never change in this lifetime. His voice was deep and mellow, with a charming magnetism. His words were not to be refuted. Xiang Yu was stunned. His sincere confession was so deep and sincere that it indirectly refuted her words. Instead, it made her words seem even more pretentious. Who was Mu Yaja? He had been on the battlefield for a long time and had traveled through bloody battles. He had seen many schemes and schemes. No matter who it was, what they were thinking, or what they were thinking, he could see through it all with just one look. How could Xiang Yu's narrow-mindedness escape his eyes? With just a few words, she had no choice but to shut up. His invisible and imposing aura made her feel a little light-headed and light-footed. This man's aura was not ordinary. His words were overbearing, making people have no choice but to submit to him. Xiang Yu smiled awkwardly and nodded. That's right. What power? What wealth? It's all fake. Only sincerity was real. The most important thing is that you care about Shirshir and the two of you are happy together. It's good that you understand. Mu Yaja paused for a moment, then said in a deep voice, Now, I'm going to bring Shirshir to meet a few of my important guests. Please return to your room. If you need anything, just instruct the housekeeper. Don't go out and walk around as much as possible. Be careful not to get lost. With that, he hugged Shirshir and left the room without looking back. Xiang Yu was momentarily stunned by his domineering declaration. She stood rooted to the ground, unable to recover her senses for a long time. Yun Qingmiao, who was behind her, was more observant. She could vaguely detect a hint of mockery in Mu Yaja's words. Her face turned pale as she tugged at her mother's clothes. Mom, what you said just now was too straightforward. People will think that we haven't seen the world. Humph. This brat clearly doesn't put me, his aunt, in his eyes. After Xiang Yu came back to her senses, she was clearly very angry. Chapter 1778. She should be thankful that she was Yun Shirshir's aunt. Even if she were to spend her entire life like this, it would be impossible for her to stand before Mu Yaja and let him take a look at her. Having said that, Xiang Yu couldn't say anything else. The three of them could only return to their room resentfully. However, just as Mu Yaja had expected, they really got lost in the huge castle. Helpless, they could only ask the butler to bring them back to their room awkwardly. Along the way, Yun Shirshir was still puzzled. She didn't know who this man was bringing her to see. It wasn't until they arrived at the reception room that she saw Lu Jinyu sitting on the sofa and smoking a cigarette that she suddenly realized what was going on. The moment Lu Jinyu saw Mu Yaja push open the door and enter, he saw the woman in his arms. He immediately stood up and greeted with a smile. Chief sister-in-law. Yun Shirshir smiled at him politely. She had a better impression of him after he helped her at the hospital last time. However, facing the lingering smoke in the reception room, she still frowned uncomfortably and waved her hand slightly. She actually didn't like the smell of cigarettes. It was very suffocating. However, Lu Jinyu knew how to read people's expressions. Seeing that she seemed to be a little disgusted by the smell of cigarettes, he immediately put out the cigarette in his hand in the ashtray. Yun Shirshir was touched by his action. He knew how to take a woman's feelings into consideration. This man should be an elegant gentleman with good etiquette. There were 3 other unfamiliar men sitting in the reception room. They also stood up behind Lu Jinyu and greeted Mu Yaja. Boss. One of the handsome men, who looked slightly younger, looked at Yun Shirshir with a hint of surprise in his eyes. However, more than that, he couldn't hide his amazement. This must be sister-in-law. Yun Shirshir smiled politely. Hello. Mu Yaja said. Let me introduce you. This is your sister-in-law, my fiancée. From now on, all of you should follow Jinyu and call her sister-in-law. When everyone heard this, they first glanced at Yun Shirshir and smiled at each other. Then they said in unison, Hello, sister-in-law. Yun Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry at such a situation.
They are.
You didn't even introduce them to me. Yun Shirshir secretly rebuked. Mu Yaja introduced Lu Jinyu. You should have met this man before. Lu Jinyu is in charge of all the affairs of the corporation under me. He's very capable. Lu Jinyu smiled and said, Sister-in-law, we met a few days ago. You should still remember me. Yun Shirshir pretended to be confused and said, I don't remember. Lu Jinyu turned pale with fright.
No way.
Sister-in-law, it's only been 2 days and you've already forgotten about me. After saying that, he couldn't hide the disappointment and sadness on his face. Yun Shirshir giggled, but she was a little shy. I'm just kidding. It's all thanks to your help at the hospital that day. How could I forget? Lu Jinyu was stunned, but he laughed out loud. His sister-in-law was really cute sometimes. This is Jiang Shen. Don't be fooled by his baby face. He's actually 27 years old. Mu Yaja introduced the man who looked exceptionally young and tender. Jiang Shen immediately protested. Boss, you can't do this. I'm only 18 years old. Chapter 1779. Judging from his appearance, she had thought that he was underage. It turned out that he was only 1 year younger than Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja then proceeded to introduce the rest of the team members. They were all his right-hand men, who were in charge of all the affairs of the Shengyu Financial Group. For example, Jiang Shen looked young, but he was the financial director of the Shengyu Financial Group and firmly controlled the financial power. Another was Pei Xiaoyu, the public relations director of the Shengyu Financial Group. He was about 25 or 26 years old and looked gentle and refined. The last was a slightly older man, Jing Cheng. The 4 of them were also attending the engagement party as Mu Yaja's brothers. After Mu Yaja's introduction, the 4 men immediately gave Yun Shirshir a friendly and respectful smile. The 4 of them addressed her as sister-in-law, but Yun Shirshir was a little at a loss. She blushed slightly. This was the first time she was facing Mu Yaja's brothers, so she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. However, after interacting with each other, they were all experts in EQ. After laughing and chatting, they easily dispelled the awkward atmosphere. They all had a close and friendly attitude towards Yun Shirshir. After all, she was Mu Yaja's fiancée, so they naturally liked her. Jiang Shen even circled Yun Shirshir twice and sighed in amazement. You're indeed the woman that boss likes. Sister-in-law, you're really elegant. This is the gown that you'll wear at the engagement party, right? Oh, sister-in-law, you're so beautiful in it. You're just like a fairy. Lu Jinyu joked, Jiang Shen, don't mess around. Boss is still standing here. Don't be fooled by boss's usual behavior. He's actually a big vinegar jar. If you get too close to him, he'll be jealous. Jiang Shen was slightly surprised. Then, he immediately kept a distance from Yun Shirshir. Boss, don't misunderstand. I don't have any feelings for sister-in-law. Lu Jinyu said, Jiang Shen, you didn't see that last time. I just helped sister-in-law up. His gaze almost killed me on the spot. If looks could kill, I would have died a long time ago. When everyone heard this, they burst into laughter again. The atmosphere in the reception room quickly livened up. It seems that after getting married, boss must be a slave to his wife. He'll listen to his wife. I'm afraid that we won't have any status in the future. Lu Jinyu sighed and shook his head as he said this. Mu Yaja shot him a look, and he immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Jiang Shen, who was standing at the side, said coolly, Jinyu, be careful with your words and actions. You'd better be careful with your words. Boss is very vengeful. If you offend him, you might lose your year-end bonus this year. Lu Jinyu immediately said pitifully, No, boss, you'd better not to be a problem boss. I'm still hoping to earn some money and find a wife in the future. You have a wife, but the rest of us are still single. You mustn't make things difficult for us. Everyone burst into laughter again. Yun Shirshir realized that when he was with them, Mu Yaja's face was not as cold as usual. Instead, he had a warm smile on his face. He did not feel much disgust when he saw his brothers making fun of him. In the Mu group, he had always been a man of his word. He gave people a feeling that he was very unapproachable. Chapter 1780. As his left and right arms, The four of them were all young and capable. Mu Yaja had taken a fancy to their character and talent, so he recruited them. From the establishment of the Shengyu Financial Group until now, the five of them had gone through storms together. It could be said that they had many years of revolutionary feelings and had long cultivated a tacit understanding that was as close as brothers. With just a glance, they could understand each other tacitly. Lu Jinyu suddenly asked, "Boss, didn't the two young masters come?" Mu Yaja looked at her. Yun Shishir immediately explained, "They got off the plane and are a little tired, so they're resting in their room for a while. You'll see them tomorrow. The children are still young. After such a long journey, they must be tired. They should rest," Jiangshan said. As he spoke, he suddenly presented a treasure. "Sister-in-law, I've specially prepared a mysterious gift for you at this engagement banquet." Yun Shishir was a little curious. "What gift?" "You'll be able to see it tomorrow. Wait and see. You'll definitely like it." Jiang Shen was smug and obviously very confident. Lu Jinyu mercilessly undermined him. "If sister-in-law doesn't like it, you'll be embarrassed. It's better than you. You came empty-handed. How can you have the nerve to criticize me?" "What do you mean I came empty-handed? I've prepared a big red packet for sister-in-law this time." Jiang Shen ruthlessly disdained. "How tacky." Lu Jinyu instantly felt hurt and looked at Yun Shishir pitifully. Yun Shishir saved the situation. "I don't think it's tacky. It's a big red packet. How big is it?" "See. Sister-in-law likes it." As he spoke, Lu Jinyu smiled mysteriously and winked at Yun Shishir. "It's a very big red packet. You'll know when you count it." Yun Shishir smiled and did not take his words to heart. Still, it was true that she was shocked by Lu Jinyu's handiwork afterward. She thought that the so-called big red packet would be at most 6 figures, which was already impressive. And the result? Lu Jinyu, on the other hand, had prepared a total of 7 figures in red packets. Most of them were treasured currencies from various countries. There were several large gift boxes. Yun Shishir counted them so many that her hands were about to cramp. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was this guy going to give her all his savings in a red packet? Of course, this was all in the future. After returning to her room from the reception room, Yun Shishir had dinner and decided to rest early. Tomorrow was the engagement party. She was nervous and slightly excited. She suddenly thought of something. She turned on the desk lamp and dialed Gong Jie's number. However, the number she dialed was not within the service area. Her heart suddenly felt a little gloomy. An indescribable desolation appeared on his face. Did he turn off his phone? Or was he purposely avoiding her? Was he still unwilling to attend her engagement party? When he thought of this, what followed was a huge disappointment. Perhaps she shouldn't have forced him to be there. It might not be a bad thing if he didn't come. After all, Gong Jie's hatred for the Mu family was already in his bones and blood. It was difficult to get rid of it. He did not strongly oppose her marriage to Mu Yaja, which was already the greatest satisfaction he could give her. Chapter 1781. The next morning, the stylist brought the perfectly ironed gown into the bedroom early in the morning, along with many bags of makeup. After washing up, it was time for more than an hour to put on makeup. The engagement party was divided into 2 parts. One was the engagement ceremony, and the other was a bonfire banquet. Thus, the stylist prepared 2 sets of gowns for her. The venue's makeup was done. The azure sea and the clear blue sky reflected each other. From afar, they formed a line. Above the clouds, a rainbow was faintly discernible. At a glance, it was as beautiful as a rainbow bridge. Seagulls hovered close to the sea's surface. A gentle breeze blew, and on the white beach was a fresh arch made of roses. These roses were picked when they were at their brightest. They were made into bouquets and flown in overnight. In the early morning, the servants put them on the arched door. The fresh and tender petals were still stained with transparent dewdrops. In front of the arch, there was a carpet of fresh flowers. Red, yellow, and purple were all blooming together. More than 100 seats were set up in the venue. In the center of the venue, 5 long buffet tables were set up. The kitchen had already started cooking desserts. In order to satisfy the needs of different guests, the flavors and ingredients were the freshest and most diverse. A fleet of BMWs was parked at the castle's entrance. Of course, the so-called fleet of BMWs did not refer to BMW cars. Instead, it was a fleet of snow-white horses. Just like in a fairy tale, everything was unbelievably beautiful. The guests who had arrived the day before were already awake. Some ran to the beach to enjoy the morning sea breeze after breakfast. Some were curious and wanted to see the venue setting, but they were politely asked to leave by the venue security personnel. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was lucky enough to catch a glimpse of the engagement party's setting. Jealousy filled her heart. How did Yun Shishir manage to hook up with such a powerful husband? It's just an engagement party. It's not even a formal wedding. Why did they spend so much money on it? They even lied to us by saying that he's a company employee. Who are they kidding? As he thought about it, his heart felt twisted. He felt that this kind of life was too unfair. After Yu and Xiao Yichen woke up, they ran to Yun Shishir's room. They had fallen asleep on the plane yesterday and were carried off the plane by the bodyguards. As a result, she missed the moment when Yun Shishir tried on the gown and missed the chance to see how beautiful her mother looked in the gown. Therefore, she hurried over early in the morning to inquire about it out of curiosity. The two little guys pushed the door open. In the huge princess room, the morning sun shone through the window. Yun Shishir stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. At this moment, she had already changed into a formal dress. She was like a blooming rose, making people unable to take their eyes off her. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He stared at her with his big watery eyes without blinking. Yu glanced at him and felt sorry for him. She kindly raised her hand to close his jaw that was about to dislocate. Xiao Yichen was still so shocked that he could not speak. He had never seen his mother look so beautiful. She was wearing a rose-colored gown and looked like a fresh flower. It was the most beautiful moment. Yu waved her hand in front of his eyes. Hello. Mu-Yichen, are you stupid? Chapter 1782. Yun Shishir was admiring the scenery of the beach through the window. The pure white beach, the circling seagulls, and the gentle sound of the waves crashing against the beach. Everything was so beautiful. The morning breeze by the beach blew in their faces, but they did not feel cold at all. Yu waved his hand in front of his eyes. Hey! Mu-Yichen, are you dumb? Xiao Yichen slapped away Yu's hand that was blocking his view. He ran excitedly towards Yun Shishir and hugged her from behind. Mommy! Yun Shishir was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she turned slightly and placed her hand gently on Xiao Yichen's shoulder. She smiled. Baby, you're awake. Xiao Yichen nodded his head vigorously and praised. Mommy is so beautiful. You look like a fairy. In the future, Mommy will wear such a beautiful dress every day, okay? Yun Shishir was amused by his innocent words. She raised her eyebrows and squatted down slightly so that she was at his eye level. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. How can I wear this dress every day? Yu walked over and said helplessly. This guy was stunned when he stood at the door just now. But Mommy, you look really good in this dress. Suddenly he could not help but say viciously, maybe Mommy doesn't care about her appearance normally and doesn't pay attention to her appearance. That's why you look as beautiful as a fairy when you dress up. This was why Mu-Yichen was taken aback by the disparity in his heart. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his words. She pretended to be sad and said, Yu, do you have to be so mean to Mommy? Xiao Yichen giggled and said, Yu has such a vicious mouth. Mommy, teach him a lesson. Yu glanced at him coldly and smacked him on the head. You're the one who's asking for a beating. Feeling aggrieved, little Yichen hugged his injured head and glared at him with a pitiful expression. Yun Shishir immediately said, Yu, don't bully your brother. Mommy, he's the one who bullied me. Yu looked aggrieved. When it came to acting innocent, he was an experienced veteran. When Yun Shishir saw his pitiful expression, she couldn't bear to scold him. Mu-Yichen retorted innocently, When did I bully you? It's clear that you've been bullying me more. You still have the nerve to ask me? Last night, you slept so restlessly. You kicked the blanket and hugged me like a bear. I didn't rest well the whole night. I was almost paralyzed by you. After Yu finished speaking, Mu-Yichen immediately looked guilty. All right. Both of you, stop fooling around, okay? Mu-Yichen nodded and said, Okay. Today is Mommy's engagement party. Xiao Yichen, you have to be good. Yu Yu ignored him and walked in front of Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was squatting down so that they were at eye level. "Mommy." Yu Yu gazed longingly at his mother's face, which was as beautiful as a flower. His eyes lingered on every inch of her face until they finally landed on her slightly slanted shoulder strap. He raised a brow, but with a gentle smile, he reached out his little hand and carefully adjusted the strap for her. He lowered his long eyelashes and the tenderness in his eyes made Yun Shirshir's heart melt. "Mommy, you're already 24 years old. Why are you still so careless? The shoulder strap is crooked. It won't be pretty anymore." Chapter 1783. As Yu Yu tidied himself up seriously, his pink lips curved into a delicate smile. Yun Shirshir stared at him in a daze. For a moment, she even held her breath, unwilling to let her heavy breathing disturb the tranquil warmth of this moment. This morning, Yu Yu got out of bed and dressed himself. He tidied up his clothes, from suspenders to a small suit to a black bow tie. He looked like a noble little gentleman, noble, elegant, and courteous. He was especially attentive. He even pinned a particularly beautiful crystal brooch in the pocket of his suit. It was obvious that he attached great importance to this special day. Yu Yu was very particular about his appearance. He usually paid attention to his clothes, but today, he dressed himself up to look especially handsome. As she looked at him, it was as if she could imagine that in 10 years, this little guy would definitely be like his father, a handsome and elegant young master. As he lowered his eyes, his long and thick eyelashes cast a deep shadow on his eyelids, making his gaze deep and charming. "How time flies." As Yu Yu smiled, he looked up at her with a pair of clear eyes. "In the blink of an eye, my mommy is actually married." Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his old-fashioned tone. She deliberately teased him. "Yu Yu, why are you so old at such a young age? When you speak, you're as mature as a little old man. Those who don't know better would think that you're marrying off a daughter." "It's not certain whether I'll have a daughter in the future. But I only have one mommy. I definitely can't bear to marry her off." For as long as he could remember, he and his mommy depended on each other. He originally thought that this kind of life would last for a long time. He even imagined that in the future, he and his mommy would depend on each other for survival until the end. He admitted that he was a mommy's boy. After all, in his life, Yun Shirshir occupied the most important position. From the time he learned how to walk, eat, go to school by himself, and take care of himself, he worked hard for everything because he wanted his mommy to live the happiest life. At that time, he thought that since he didn't have a daddy and his mommy was so lonely, he must accompany her to the end. He was the only man in mommy's life. Therefore, he saw loving her and taking care of her as his most important mission, and it was his duty to do so. He did not feel that this was a burden. Instead, he enjoyed this responsibility and mission. However, on this day, his mission had probably been handed over to Mu Yaja like a baton being handed over. He felt happy and blissful, but he was also reluctant to part with her. He was happy because mommy finally had her own happiness. In the future, she would no longer be alone and would no longer be lonely. He was reluctant because after handing over this mission, he felt an indescribable sense of emptiness in his heart. His feelings for Yun Shirshir were complicated and uneasy, generous and selfish. Yun Shirshir saw that there were some complicated emotions in his expression. He seemed lonely, happy, and worried. For a moment, she couldn't figure out what this child was thinking in his heart at that moment. She smiled softly and gently placed her hand on the back of his hand. Yu Yu suddenly turned his hand over to hold hers. Chapter 1784. Yu Yu smiled and said, "Mommy, you love Daddy. But what I want to tell you now is that even though you'll grow old and I'll grow up, my heart will always be with you. Right now, I'm handing you over to Daddy because I believe that he'll be able to give you happiness and take on the responsibilities of a husband. But if he bullies you, feel free to tell me. If he lets you down, I won't hesitate to take you back from Daddy even if I have to give it my all. Do you understand?" For some reason, Yun Shirshir felt an inexplicable bitterness in her heart when he said those words with such deep emotion. How could her Yu Yu be so sensible? For a 7-year-old child to say such words, it was not something that should be said at his age. Yun Shirshir pulled him into her embrace and smiled. "All right, Yu Yu, Mommy will definitely be happy." Xiao Yichen suddenly stood aside and felt touched for a moment. Perhaps he could not fully understand Yu Yu's current state of mind. If it was in the past, he would definitely think that it was just an engagement. After the wedding, the four of them would become a family and truly be together. This should be something to be happy about, shouldn't it? But now he did not think so anymore. After spending so much time together, he truly understood the close bond between Yu and Mommy. It was a bond that was thicker than blood. These 7 years were neither long nor short, but they had experienced countless emotions and drifted through wind and rain. It was precisely because of this bond that Yu was worried that Mommy would not be happy. That was why he felt uneasy. Just like those fathers who married off their daughters, the atmosphere at the wedding was clearly so happy, but when they handed their daughters' hands to the young man, they felt reluctant, uneasy, nervous, relieved, worried, touched. All kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings. As if they were telepathic, Xiao Yichen could even vaguely feel Yu's reluctance. He could empathize with him. Yu said seriously, "Mommy, you must be happy. Otherwise, he would definitely regret his decision." He regretted handing her over to his father. Yun Shishir gently caressed his palm-sized handsome face and nodded with a smile. However, her eyes were faintly moist. She tried her best to hold back the sourness in her heart. At 11:30 a.m., the guests entered the venue one after another. Everyone entered the venue and sat in their seats, chatting and laughing. Today was a good day. This island was located in a semi-tropical zone and was warm all year round. Bathing in the fresh sea breeze and feeling the embrace of the blue sky and the sea, one could not help but feel carefree. At the main venue of the wedding, many children of the VIPs were smiling and taking photos in front of the arch decorated with flowers. Most children liked beautiful things. Some of the children who loved to cry would forget to make a fuss in this romantic atmosphere. They would sit in their parents' arms and smile innocently. Mu Yaja's group of brothers also rushed to the venue and started to entertain the guests. Yun Yecheng pushed Yun Yeho's wheelchair and sat down under the arrangement. Yun Yeho looked around at the romantic venue and could not help but sigh. This venue seems to have been prepared with great care. Chapter 1785. Surrounded by such a romantic atmosphere, she did not even dare to raise her voice. Yun Yecheng nodded with a smile. It's a once-in-a-lifetime engagement, after all. The preparations must be meticulous. This shows that Shishir's fiancé dotes on Shishir a lot. He put in the effort to give her such a romantic wedding. Today is a good day. I'm so excited that I can't sit still. Yun Yecheng smiled. You just have to sit still and watch Shishir receive everyone's blessings. Yun Yeho smiled, feeling happy for Yun Shishir from the bottom of his heart. Yun Qingmiao, who was sitting at the side, could not hold back her surging emotions. All her attention was on the romantic setting of the wedding. Yun Qinli, on the other hand, was looking left and right. She could not help feeling disappointed when she did not spot Gu Xingzi's figure. It seemed that Yun Shishir and Gu Xingzi's relationship was not that good, after all. Gu Xingzi did not attend the engagement ceremony, which meant that the two were not on good terms. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was only focused on observing the guests present. The venue was divided into the groom's and the bride's seats. The bride's seats were filled with Yun Shishir's relatives and friends. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was sizing up the groom's guests' attire, and identity tokens. She was obviously looking for a match. From time to time, she would tug at Yun Qingmiao's sleeves and whisper to her about which guest was young and handsome, which guest was wearing an expensive watch, and which guest looked rich. Xiao Shui, who was sitting at the side, heard all of this. She frowned in disgust and wanted to flare up on the spot. She did not expect Shishir to have such a top-notch relative. What was this? Today was Shishir's engagement ceremony, yet this top-notch relative was actually looking for a rich and powerful man for her daughter. If not for the special occasion today, she would have lost her temper on the spot. Xiao Shui forced herself to hold it in. She planned to bring it up to Yun Shishir after the banquet. At 11:40, the BMW appeared at the gate of the castle on time. When Yun Shishir appeared at the door in her splendid attire, she saw 2 rows of concierges holding gift books in their hands. Their postures were ramrod straight and their chests puffed out. Standing at the end were 2 rows of flower boys holding fresh and tender white roses in their hands. As for the flower boys, she didn't know where Mu Yaja had hired them from. They had delicate features, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Standing in the middle of the cluster of flowers, they looked holy and beautiful. The words of the white rose symbolized respect and holy love. Only you are compatible. At the same time, it also means that you belong to me. Yun Shirshir looked at the beautiful bouquets and smiled. At the entrance of the castle, a red carpet was laid out neatly. At the end of the red carpet was a BMW waiting for her. Mu Yaja stood beside the carriage. When Yun Shirshir's gaze fell on him, she couldn't help but be shocked. It was not that she had never seen him in a suit before. In fact, this man had a preference for suits. Perhaps it was because of his status, but he would only take off his suit and change into casual clothes on rare occasions. In the past, he had always worn a well-ironed suit. However, she had never seen a man who could make a suit look so cold, elegant, and noble. Chapter 1786. However, with that handsome face of his, when he appeared in front of her against the light, she was like a young and immature girl. Her heart was stirred and her heart was beating wildly. So handsome. Especially his hairstyle, which had been carefully trimmed. In the past, his fringe naturally covered his handsome eyebrows. It was not messy, but it did not disappoint. Now that he had styled his hair, his handsome face was completely revealed. His deep and mesmerizing eyes were even more captivating, making it impossible for anyone to avoid them. His gaze seemed to have a magical power. When it landed on her body, it made her heart beat like thunder. She was so nervous that she even forgot how to calm her breathing. Mu Yaja also looked at her with a gentle smile on his lips. It seemed that only because it was her when he smiled, that gentleness could reach the bottom of his eyes. Suddenly, music started playing. Amidst the sacred music, the flower children held bouquets and sang a sacred and romantic poem in unison. Love is a star shrouded in the morning fog. Without you, heaven also becomes hell. Adorable warhorse, subtly trembling, this shy and gentle embrace. On your beautiful cherry lips, I'm used to using kisses instead of words. My kiss is like a flame from the bottom of my heart. The happiness that kissed me yesterday has turned into nothingness today. I've obtained sincere love, spending time with you under the parasol tree. A flower child came forward and handed the bouquet of white roses to Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja took the bouquet and slowly walked towards her. With every step he took, her heartbeat actually sped up. The person in front of him was standing there, waiting for him to welcome her and hold her hand. Mu Yaja looked at her. Against the light, his gaze was like a torch, unwavering. Yun Shirshir's hands were crossed in front of her as she nervously watched him approach. Her skirt reached the ground, holy and dignified. Even if the wind slightly ruffled her hair, it did not diminish her beauty at all. Speaking of which, temperament was a very strange thing. Some people were born noble, but they didn't have an elegant temperament. As for her, although she wasn't born into a noble family and wasn't born into a rich family, when she appeared at the entrance of the castle, wearing a luxurious dress, her elegant and noble temperament couldn't be concealed and was on the verge of bursting out. Mu Yaja walked in front of her with his right hand behind his back and his left hand holding a bouquet of flowers. He only stopped when he was right in front of her and nodded to look at her. The melodious music of the ceremony sounded. Everyone on the scene held their breaths, either in amazement or anticipation as they stared at this moment. His lowered gaze made her even more nervous. For a moment, her mind was blank and she was at a loss of what to do. She didn't even know where to place it properly. The first time in her life, which she had fantasized about countless times, was displayed so realistically and dreamily in front of her. When the man in her heart stood in front of her with a rose in his hand, she suddenly realized that the wedding in her fantasy was not a dream. Yun Shirshir looked at him with a blushing face and a hint of shyness. It was as if her face was dyed with peach blossoms. Even the best quality rouge couldn't compare to her at this moment. She pursed her lips and took the white roses from his hand. Around them, there was a round of applause. Chapter 1787. Yun Shirshir nodded and replied in a voice as soft as a mosquito. In the next second, under everyone's stunned gazes, the man carried her in a princess carry. Hugging her waist, he easily supported all of her weight. Mu Yaja gently lowered his head and gracefully kissed her lips, pressing them tightly against her red lips. At this moment, his low and hoarse voice undoubtedly revealed that he was equally happy. "You're so beautiful today." Hearing this, Yun Shirshir's heart was filled with sweetness and shyness at the same time. Her face became even hotter. No matter how many praises she received, it would not be able to compare to this sentence from him. The highest praise in love was probably this sentence of love from him at this moment. He rarely said such words of love. This man had always been reserved and deep, but when he said it, it made her heart beat faster. Yun Shirshir held the fresh flowers tightly and looked up, only to meet his deep eyes. There was a slight burning heat in them, and he did not hide his deep love for her, who was beautiful today. Mu Yaja gently carried her and walked towards the carriage. Even though he was carrying her, his body was as light as a swallow and his steps were light. After getting into the carriage, the concierge walked over and closed the door. The attendant then drove the carriage to the venue of the engagement banquet. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen watched the carriage leave. They looked at each other and smiled, then got into the same carriage and immediately caught up. Sitting in the carriage, Yun Shirshir was surprised to find that along the way, both sides of the road were covered with roses. As the carriage moved, the petals scattered on the ground. When the wind blew, the petals flew and danced in the air. It was as if they were in a fairy tale. "It's so beautiful." Yun Shirshir was so touched that she couldn't help but mumble. Today, he really gave her a big surprise and touched her. She never thought that this man, who was used to being cold and arrogant, would spend so much effort on the engagement banquet. Even the smallest details were not overlooked. Putting aside the huge amount of money he had spent, just the fact that he was able to bring out all the romantic scenes that she had imagined in front of her was enough to make her feel that it was extremely valuable. She was a person who was easily satisfied. She believed that weddings generally went according to the procedure. The most important thing was to be with the person she loved. Nothing else mattered. But he used his actions to tell her that if he loved her, he would spare no effort to fulfill all her dreams. At the same time, he was grateful for his luck. Being able to meet him and stay together with him had truly exhausted all of her luck. The smile on her face fell into his eyes, and he quickly smiled as well. Laughter was contagious between people who were close to each other. She suddenly looked up and said, "Mu Yaja, am I dreaming?" "Why do you say that?" "Because it's hard to believe that you've done so much for me. I didn't dare to think that my engagement party would be so romantic, so I was afraid that this was a dream. When I woke up, it would be over and there would be nothing left." Everything that entered his eyes was something that he had only seen in his dreams. Yun Shirshir's worry made him even more amused. He reached out and brushed away the petals that had fallen on her head. He then gently scratched the bridge of her nose. This action seemed to be something that he often did to her. It became the most intimate action between the two of them. He whispered in her ear, "Little fool, this isn't a dream. Everything is real, including me." Chapter 1788. But really, she was really nervous about what she had just seen and what he had just said. Apart from being nervous, she was also looking forward to the upcoming engagement banquet. He looked at her and saw her exposed neck and shoulders. They were fair and delicate, like the graceful curve of a swan. Following the curve, he could see her beautiful fullness. Sexy and charming. Seducing his gaze, he became more and more eager to explore. However, he restrained himself and warned himself that now was not the time to do whatever he wanted. Usually at this time, his ambition would be revealed. He desperately hoped that after the engagement banquet, their wedding would proceed as soon as possible. He was already anxious to keep her as his own. How could he let others think about and covet her when she was so beautiful? "What's the venue like? I'm really curious about how you decorated it," she asked with some anticipation, but he still pretended to be mysterious and blinked his eyes. "You'll know when we reach the venue. You just have to wait quietly for the engagement banquet that I've prepared for you." Yun Shirshir's lips suddenly curved slightly. His answer made her look forward to it even more and her heart felt even sweeter. The carriages moved forward and soon arrived at the venue. However, just as she was about to get off the carriage, as if he could not bear for her toes to touch the ground, he carried her out of the carriage again in front of everyone's eyes. Yun Shirshir hit his shoulder lightly but not hard. In her eyes, there was a hint of shyness. "Put me down. You're making a joke out of yourself. Who dares to laugh at you?" Mu Yaja asked her back. This made her even more embarrassed. However, as he said this, he still put her down. However, just as she steadied herself, the man's strong and warm hand held her hand without hesitation. Yun Shirshir laughed in her heart. Was this man afraid that she would run away? But as she thought of this, her heart was still happy. At least, it meant that he cherished her, didn't it? From the man's details, she could see how important she was in his heart. When they arrived at the entrance of the venue and stepped on the red carpet, fireworks bloomed and fell on them. The innocent and romantic laughter of the flower girls standing on both sides of the red carpet quickly stirred up the atmosphere of the entire venue. Yun Shirshir had a panoramic view of the entire venue.
I like it so much.
Especially that arch decorated with flowers, it was simply too romantic. In the past, when she watched movies, she was especially envious of couples standing under this romantic arch and receiving blessings. Yun Shirshir secretly sighed in her heart. She let him hold her hand and walked towards the venue. Mu Yaja suddenly caught sight of Lu Jinyu, who was walking out of the venue. Lu Jinyu looked inexplicably nervous, as if he had something important to tell him. Mu Yaja couldn't help but stop and raise his eyebrows in confusion. Seeing that he had stopped walking, Yun Shirshir also looked at him curiously. However, when she saw that he was looking into the distance, she followed his line of sight and looked at Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu walked over and said in a low voice, "Chief, there was news just now that an unidentified armed cargo ship forced its way to the port of the island. A few unidentified foreign men came down from the ship. I don't know what's going on at the moment, but I'm planning to go over and take a look." Chapter 1789. Mu Yaja's eyes were filled with suspicion, and his tone was filled with displeasure. "Didn't you order people to seal off this place? Why are there still people barging in?" "It's my fault. But I've already sent people to guard this place, and the sea route is tightly sealed. I don't know the origin of this cargo ship. I've already sent people to stop them, but because those people are carrying weapons of mass destruction, there's been some conflict at the scene. I'm about to rush over to take a look at the situation." Mu Yaja's eyes darkened, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. "You're saying that it's an armed cargo ship that forcefully docked at the port?"
Yes.
"What other suspicious information do you have?" Lu Jinyu pondered for a moment and then replied, "Based on the information we have, it should be a cargo ship full of military munitions. As far as I know, such cargo ships are usually used by arms dealers to transport military munitions, and they are equipped with a large number of military munitions. These people are very aggressive, and it seems like they want to barge into the venue. However, I also suspect that they might be pirates who hijacked the cargo ship. But it's just a suspicion, and it hasn't been confirmed yet." Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. Arms dealers were businessmen or organizations that engaged in the trade of military munitions. Generally speaking, these business groups would use shipping to transport goods from the factory to the front line of the battlefield in order to fool others. Generally speaking, shipping was a more common method of transport. It was safe and carried large quantities. Generally speaking, cargo ships would be equipped with a large number of well-trained mercenaries. This was a private island. Although it was equipped with a relatively high level of security, it would definitely not be able to gain the upper hand if they were to deal with these people. Arms dealers, that was an organization that played with the flames of war. What could be more lethal than this? But why would an armed cargo ship barge in? The abilities of these people who came were really not small. Immediately, he ordered, "Go over and take a look. If there's anything, report to me immediately."
Yes.
"I'll rush over to take a look now." Lu Jinyu rushed over as soon as he finished speaking. Yun Shirshir saw that the two of them were nervous and alert as they talked, so she couldn't help but feel worried. "What's wrong?"
Nothing.
"Don't worry." However, just as he finished speaking, the rumbling sound of an armed helicopter could be heard from afar. Mu Yaja raised his head abruptly and saw a helicopter approaching the venue from the direction of the port. All the guests couldn't help but panic. Looking at the helicopter of unknown origin that suddenly appeared in the sky above their heads, no one knew what was going on, and they were faintly panicking. The strong wind created by the propeller was like a tsunami, sweeping away the flowers and trees. Yun Shirshir's skirt was also blown up by the strong wind. Mu Yaja immediately protected her behind him, handsome eyes cold, eyes vigilantly looking at the approaching plane. The helicopter slowly landed, and the cabin door was suddenly pushed open. At the cabin door, a tall and straight figure suddenly leaned out. His military windbreaker was fluttering in the wind, and his sleeves were fluttering. The man had one hand on the cabin door and the other on his hat. His casual posture could not hide his noble and arrogant demeanor. He raised his head slightly, revealing his incomparably handsome face to everyone's eyes. Chapter 1790. Mu Yaja's gaze turned cold. He was even more wary of this man's aggressiveness. Alas, when she caught sight of the man's handsome face, her breath caught in her throat and she could not make a sound for a moment. At the entrance of the helicopter, Gong Jie was dressed in a military trench coat. The sleeves of his coat fluttered in the wind, and a pair of snow-white military boots made him look even more handsome. His silver-white hair fluttered in the strong wind, constantly invading his arrogant and handsome face. The helicopter slowly made a forced landing. The wind and waves swept up sand and sand. The surrounding guests were either shocked or surprised as they gathered together and looked up at the godlike figure who seemed to have descended from the sky. Who is that? Gosh, isn't that a military helicopter? Who is that? Who is that man? He's so handsome. What a beautiful man. Look at his eyes. They're so mesmerizing. Yun Shishir watched the helicopter descend lower and lower. She widened her eyes in disbelief until she saw that familiar and devilish face. For a moment, an inexplicable bitterness and emotion welled up in her heart. Then, she covered her mouth with her trembling hands and cried tears of joy. Xiao Jie, he's here. She thought that he wouldn't show up at her engagement party. Xiao Jie had said that the hatred of the Mu family's matricide had seeped into their bones and blood. It was impossible to get rid of it. The Gong and Mu families were irreconcilable. He would not object, but he would not attend her engagement party with the intention of giving her his blessings. Although he did not say it explicitly, she understood the meaning behind his words. Therefore, she had already mentally prepared herself to not have him at such an important moment in her life. She did not expect that he would appear. Like a god, he descended from the sky and appeared in front of her. Rumble. The helicopter's propellers whirred at high speed. A suspension ladder was suddenly lowered from the cabin's entrance. Gong Jie gracefully and nimbly descended the ladder. When he was 3 meters away from the ground, he abruptly let go of the handrail and landed suavely. With a leap, he landed steadily on the ground. Ah, that was so dangerous. Jumping down from such a high place is too scary. Everyone cried out in surprise. However, when he stood up straight, he took off the white military cap on his head and raised his head. His lips curled into an arrogant and enchanting arc. The aura that accompanied him seemed to be natural and noble. It was dangerous and domineering to the point of being unreasonable. The powerful aura instantly spread toward the crowd. It was impossible to resist it, stunning everyone at the scene. It was as if he was an innate king, causing others to involuntarily submit to him. Gong Jie quietly stood where he was. His eyes fell on Yun Shishir and he was suddenly shocked. However, there was a flash of emotion on his face and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Thank goodness. He wasn't too late. This time, he went to sign a bill and hurriedly loaded the goods. He didn't even have the time to send the batch of munitions to the battlefield, so he hurriedly changed his route and rushed here. She wanted to arrive at the venue on the day of the engagement banquet. Along the way, the cargo ship was unlucky. It suddenly encountered a thunderstorm and had to temporarily anchor at the port for a period of time to avoid the wind and rain. However, when he looked at the time, he was afraid that he would not be able to make it. Therefore, he did not wait for the thunderstorm to pass and hurriedly set sail again.